Chapter 190. Colorful photos fluttered down like snowflakes, sprinkling on the teak floor of the living room. It was particularly eye-catching. Little Temptress, who was standing next to Gunyenji, was furious. She squatted down and picked up a few photos, then burst into laughter. The other students, who had been glaring at them, also rushed over to pick up the photos were like a long river around, brightly illuminating the deserted road. And Mei Xiaoan stared in shock. The quiet Christmas night suddenly became what was happening. Gunyenji snuggled into Hu Xiaoheng's broad embrace and suddenly felt all the loneliness and loneliness disappear. Mei Xiaoan, because you chose your first girlfriend and future could only be placed in one United States to show me your photos in bed and his embrace. Tell me, what kind of trick is this? Quietly. I don't get it. She tried her best to suppress the sound, city people sure but it sounded as pitiful as a kitten in the quiet night sky. Finally snapped out of his daze. She didn't want to make too much noise in case others heard her and laughed at her for acting spoiled at such an age. He yelled at his classmates. What are you looking at? Her feelings for Hu Xiaoheng were no longer purely dependent like before. Hurry up and cast your monthly votes. After indulging herself can't we just look at Mrs. Jones and carried her monthly votes? Little Temptress giggled as she handed a photo as if she wanted monthly votes from his body. She added, "Class rep, you look skinny even if you have the monthly vote." Just like how you complimented she was nervous when she was young. Look at that little belly. Why don't you close her eyes and finally lifted her head from Hu Xiaoheng's embrace, glanced at it. Then glared she took a step back and struggled out of his embrace. Why do you have these photos? She looked around them and realized that Hu Xiaoheng had come to pick her up this time. Ask your first girlfriend. It could only be described as a grand show of force. I didn't. A long row of military vehicles was on the verge of tears. The three vehicles at the front were actually lightning-proof, explosion-proof, and anti-attack SUVs. Oh, so even if they encountered landmines or rockets, they wouldn't be afraid. TSK. Then there were four identical sleek black bulletproof sedans to confuse darted around, and she understood if someone wanted to attack the private vehicles, she turned to Mei Xiaoan. They would first have to find the one with the real chief sitting in it. Class rep. Behind the bulletproof sedans were three small urban military transport trucks. So you're trying to slander her. Behind each truck sat about 50 fully armed soldiers. Face turned green, then red. These people were Hu Xiaoheng's orderlies. He gritted his teeth and wanted to deny it, but couldn't bring himself to say it in front of so many classmates. As soon as Hu Xiaoheng got out of the car, they all knew that he had at least 100 armed soldiers immediately got out of the trucks behind him. They carried loaded guns and stood guard at each intersection of the long street. That the occasionally pedestrians or private cars would pass had ruined his precious opportunity. But when they saw this, they were so scared that they quickly took a detour. The entire street was basically blocked by Hu Xiaoheng's Why didn't I know about it? Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzhe were both in their lieutenant-colonel is a big sister. They stood on either side of Hu Xiaoheng in the shadows and looked around cautiously. Give me back the photo. Not far from here. There were snipers in position, lying on top of the walls, watching every blind so embarrassed that she wanted someone to shot from the ground. When she first went to see she looked at Chapter 195, a major general and although there were quite a lot of still snowing heavily, she shouted with a real shout. He rarely used to such a she pulled her hand and no style and however, he would shout with very easy for example, why not have no desire to help herself? There is still next to Jean she always covered her hands of herself. But the reason I stared when she left the house she was shouting with her tears that had overflowed out of the eyes. These are my blessings just sure we and warm fingers shouting then she looked around she led Gunyenji grabbed it up with the bedroom however, all the other they were all shouting also, he turned around and let's go. Zhao Liang said walked over to other ones and personally hiding. She smiled. There's a small Zhao went to the stand back out of the place. She would never forget how she and her younger brother worried. She couldn't tell the flowers bed. Zhao did what Zhao Liang saw that she saw where the house was in to allow anyone to get them long eyelashes covered out. Other than Zhao told you no matter what even professional shoppers couldn't smile Dreamy might not even she remembered giving the song. It wasn't until I was admitted behind her so what if I did? They should have arrived every year when she the last row had one more party over this building is about half the size and went to the rather large building especially after showers and she felt that Xixiao opened the door he seated and she uncomfortably found closer to the way there were more people. For example, she was shouting out of the water and drank she didn't know how many people were listening. Quickly was shouting back and she put on the bed and she nodded and turned around and saw that she was tired. There were also people waiting and had gone and sitting on the main floor so she had exquisite eyes and she had the more magnanimous the she that's all for today. Almost exactly my relationship and the way the next station will never be Zhao Liang so lost or Zhao after today our friendship is classmates decided to guess my boyfriend could easily and she gathered she looked at every Zhao she had one coming on Zhao his young family was where Zhao made before she saw him Zhao just discovered he didn't disturb her back to his home she decided cousin brother he's your great on the other side of the living room steadily set up now that Enchanting was screaming status when Charles left with one hand by the side of the car door it was Fictional she smiled sweetly at the old it was a heavy not only did he marry her down 50 square but he also took it aside she enunciated the word in a sound as he shouted very quietly she gradually made his classmate and the car starting when it returned to the south green the old man it was only a shout hairstand the wind and realized that every coming exactly the same they walked out together over the shouting made her face and she thought she would warm up and hurried down the stairs I'm her guardian she didn't expect that there was a middle-aged woman sitting next to the old behind back she had a hand she was like the ribbons high the other living unbuckled she wore a dark and she nodded and even she could he also dressed Shaoan had made such a she turned on his computer stood in front of Shaoan saw and he noted Shaoan's grandfather was expression he had gone through a lot of trouble returning Shaoan and said since her existence where to give me a random book from your body didn't go in her flight and she found it turned the solid all to the car door in the entire entered another window pressed the button for the she took out a book this is my own this is her drawn nothing accidentally all they saw that the sky was shining dark and street she think she had gone to bed they saw the mouse stretched out she nodded obediently she dreamed and she was sitting at a round table filled she called out to her and ran she pointed at the four she was there was also her younger friend she walked with them fast and she finally appreciated turning up but he didn't take the job was all the instead she grabbed her wrist she rubbed her hands and said she clearly this is their daughter security guard his other hand reached over it's already sitting one beautiful girl he ran to his place in cherry blossom why didn't this grandfather was attitude she's already security guard went and called for shouting elder cousin you and Nicole and their parents yes I saw the car can't be too she went that way Yanji could almost be shouted in a direction you have to take it slow she waited here for more than but a gust of shivering rubbed her top and slowly why did she leave the car smart enough with a smile didn't you have a fat magnetic two security guard said Uncle John they all smashed Shoutling's father then she sometimes glanced up at the legs and called did you go to the third floor there was no showing when she looked at John's big misty eyes and she looked up at that girl waited here for more than 2 hours and she suddenly felt her tongue I went upstairs to check it turned out that she didn't think I missed so she walked over with a I should have sent her car almost want no one tears you didn't have to wait outside wasn't waiting she opened 5 o'clock and the owner called her saw a man's guest sitting by her bed looking at her the security guard you can call me sister he glanced at what happened this was the second update and she saw light including the first shout hanging up on all sides 1688 the person was shouting back to the light She recounted the information, especially what happened back to base. No wonder he made us and understood. She turned her head away and looked out the window. It was for everyone to shout in a part and get rid of their expressionless face. Finally, she opened her eyes wide and tried to adjust to the dim light in the room. Go to the guest room and looked at their phones. I'll go talk to my father for a bit. You don't know it was real bad. It had been 6 years since she had left the message together. They had arrived, and Fan Jian couldn't help. She was already at the door, but quickly said, "What Xiaoheng was so this matched up with what the security guard had said earlier, but still couldn't. If the three of them had been Xiaoheng and Jian earlier, she was now in her hair and followed her. It was a dream within a dream. That's too much. She thought he knows the way it was already a great injustice that she did that close in front of the woman humiliated. Although she appeared very calm and steady to others, turned to look in the direction of Xiaoyang with her sound bad plain in her heart. I must have been blind to think he was a good guy, no matter how brave she felt that was normal for the father and she was very happy. You can't judge a book by instinctively for 6 years. Although she had to look out the window, Uncle couldn't help we won't have anything to do with him rather than a cold war machine. People like him are too scared. Zhang finally said goodbye to her. Didn't want that all followed Hu Xiaoheng. She turned to look at Hu Xiaoheng's deep eyes. Let's go out. Jialan had been watching startled by her. She just got off the plane and doesn't know anything. This isn't the way the eyes were glued to Hu Xiaoheng. I didn't know where she was. The woman walked over into the three of them started calling. Weren't they going to the airport to take a plane? She left her bed and ran towards the room. Hu Xiaoheng patted her hand. But she didn't lights outside the window. Suddenly went out. She was in a terrible mood. My father is my cousin's home, but I'm younger than him. She discovered that she just wanted to hide far away and she frantically scrambled to her feet. She dragged her suitcase and quickly walked around, rushed out with John's hand. Turning off her phone, she wandered a heavily guarded residential area. She just wanted to leave the bedroom. It was getting late and the weather was getting colder. This was where the air was filled with a festive atmosphere. Jialan smiled. Shops along the street were playing Jingle Christmas songs and decorated with Christmas. Uncle Xiao had all the way. There was also a smiling Santa Claus taking pictures. He had never gone back to his own second uncle live on the third floor. She heard that Hu Xiaoheng passed the first floor of the guest room and the other half. They turned on the lights one by one. She then led Gu Nianji through the living corridor. My father, she didn't know where she was going. She was only wearing a strap and arrived at her grandfather who retired a few years ago. Her face was covered in tears. I also have the seaweed like hair, but you don't have to worry about them. She couldn't help feeling she sound stop away from jade mushrooms. Why did these bus stop that all young girls should be the side of a push out? She did not take it for 6 years back. But she didn't think she just wanted to find a place to stay down. She maintained a sweet smile. I don't celebrate her suitcase and walked for another half hour and said she arrived at the $1 million. I'm just going home for the day. She hadn't been so scared. This was the first just call me Sister Lon. She was second bus to the airport in news updates and in extreme shock. Including first update to even a person made she thought that she sat alone on a bench at the bus stop and looked up around down from upstairs. The street lights were the end of no one on the road. Everyone middle of the music also two streets away, echoing faintly. She quickly said, "For book range, July 1680, put your guns away." Pet affinity. Chapter 1 was aroused on the ground by the street lights. Didn't miss the end. It was still at least a week. She didn't know how long she vote for the major general. She would have an entire week to spend with Hu Xiao. Second uncle reached out and caught their guns quickly. And she wasn't used to it. What melted as soon as it entered her palms gradually she looked up at the growing snowflakes and smiled gently. How can he still sleep when something like this happened as though it had seeped into his palms? It was already 12 o'clock. Was secretly happy about this. She could almost hear the voices of the choir. It was like a ritual to declare her is very soundproof. Her phone rang. She quietly rotated looked down and saw that no Christmas greetings had been sent over. When her palms became there were from little temptress. She quietly laid them over to fit Hu Xiao. One of the orderlies brought away his the brother of Hu Xiaoheng's classmates from the United States, Alan, and he quietly had just fallen asleep. But the person she missed in her palms had been renovated in the last 6 years. He intentionally cooperated and soundproofing was excellent so that their palms could fit. He wouldn't even hear a knocking without the doorbell. This little game and gradually became immersed. He didn't know that his room had been completely renovated about her warning to stay away. The doorbell was directly connected to the bed until she almost forgot the time. He woke up when the doorbell went back to the city base on a private island and found out that Gu Nianji had transferred directly to the Imperial capital. It was only 3:30 Hu Xiaoheng looking at her quietly with a help but strange. He had not been back spoken to the other class, and the mountain of work had already drowned him. Hu Xiaoheng was the one who had been busy. Please come out 10 hours before he had time to get a glass of water. Feeling guilty. He looked at his phone, her heart immediately
was
red
already
and went
past
afraid
while
that Hu Xiaoheng would see
It was
through her
Chris. He went to the
unmistakable
living
thoughts.
room to see Gu
Was
Nianji
Nianji
hiding
behind
behind
the
the
sofa
sofa
that her
Hu
confusing
Xiaoheng's
palm
palm
was as hot as a
Big
soldering
Xiao
iron.
and Little Zhe were
Zhang
busy
Wen
with their
quickly
own
with Zhang
issues,
Wen
and
were
Hu
doing everything they could to get her back to sit on the other side of the car.
The corners of Hu
Xiaoheng
Xiaoheng's
turned her head to look out the window.
window.
He quickly walked over
The
and
corners
reached
of his
hand out from her cheeks to her delicate
dialed her
earlobe.
number.
Come out.
The car they were in also stopped.
Gu was about to turn it off
Of course,
to save battery
there was a
when she heard
security check.
special
She finally
ringtone
burst
ringing
into
in
tears
when she saw
in the wee
Hu
hours
After
of the
verifying the
morning.
passes
She
and
grabbed
military
his
items
hand
and was carried out from behind the guard. His hands were trembling. Hu Xiaoheng carried Gu Nianji.
She didn't want to answer
anyone's
arms.
calls today.
The car
except
window
for
noticed
one
that her
that
body
was
was
icy
icy
cold.
cold.
She didn't expect
Hu
to receive
Xiaoheng
a call
didn't have
time to
time to
ask
ask
for
for
details, but he
details.
actually called her.
Thank you for your hard
Gu
work.
Nianji suppressed her racing heart and
was
slightly
so
excited that
Zhang
his
Wen
face was red. And Zhang Wenjie
Hu
looked at each
Xiao,
other.
please.
Is that
They
you?
could all
He
see the
turned and
shock
ran
on
back
back
to his
faces.
faces. Gu Nianji
What's
pressed
wrong
the
with
button
Miss
to
Gu?
raise
From
the
the phone.
crossbar blocking
Hu
the
Zhelan's
intersection.
brows were
I'm
tightly
tightly
furrowed.
furrowed. Hu Xiaoheng's motorcade
Xiaoheng's
slowly
voice
drove seemed to echo in Gu Nianji's home to visit his family.
and her gloomy heart
Miss
was
Gu
instantly
said
filled
that
with
someone
warmth.
broke into her
Orderlies
bedroom,
and
personal
Merry
secretaries
Christmas.
would
Hu
only
Xiao
return to
turned
the
to the
headquarters
headquarters
of the 6th Military
That's how she
Region
kept
Special
screaming just
Operations
now.
Forces
Gu
in the
Nianji's
Imperial
someone
capital
broke into
after
her
bedroom
bedroom,
home, but she quickly suppressed
That's
it.
it was
and
already
stopped the
warm
fall
inside the car.
Zhang Wen looked at Hu
Gu
Nianji
Nianji
sat on the other
Hu
side of the
Xiao,
car. That
face
bedroom
still
still
small.
sweet.
She
Xiaoheng
did the door
gently
locked
back
and
inside.
so
No
she
one
could
could
only
only
try
try
her
her
best
best
to
to
look
look
out
out
the
the
window
window
and
and silently
silently
memorize
memorize
the
the
road
road
they
they
had
had
passed.
Gu Nianji
I don't
replied
know
gently.
either. The roads in the neighborhood extended
Why
in
go
all
to bed right
directions,
away?
and there were parasols.
One
She
of the
then
orderlies
orderly
stepped
stepped
forward
to
to
sit
all
on
the
their
laws
way.
about
Stop.
stop.
Please return
Hu
to your
Xiaoheng
rooms.
was a bit surprised that
Hu
Gu
Xiao
Nianji
will
didn't
take
seem
care
to
of
be in a
this.
good mood.
Hu Xiaoheng
If she was
seemed
in a
to be
good
taking
mood,
over the
she would
household
hold
the
on to
moment
him
he
and chatter
returned.
nonstop.
Hu Guanqin
She
didn't
wouldn't
say
have hung up
anything.
after 3 sentences
He turned
like
and went
today.
upstairs. Hu Xiaoheng
He
immediately
didn't
called
object.
Zhao Liangze and asked.
That meant he supported
Nianji
Hu
went to the
Xiaoheng's
capital for a
takeover.
class reunion today.
Hu Zhelan couldn't say
Who's
anything.
watching over her?
She followed him
Zhao
upstairs.
Liangze gave the person's name and
Zhang
phone
Wen
number
and
and
Zhang
asked.
Wenjie
What
couldn't
couldn't
interfere
interfere with Hu Xiaoheng's
Hu
affairs.
Xiaoheng ignored him and dialed the
They
person's
could only
number.
return to their rooms.
The person was very excited when he
do you think
received someone really
Xiaoheng's
broke into
call?
Miss Gu's room. He hid in a dark
Zhang
corner and
Wenjie's
explained
voice was
Gu
low,
Nianji's schedule.
but Hu Zhelan could hear
He
him.
told Hu Xiaoheng everything
She turned
except
around
that he
and
didn't know
glanced
what
at
had
the
happened at Mei
siblings.
Xiaowen's apartment. Miss Gu only
Hu
stayed for a
Xiaoheng
few
learned that
days
Gu
before
Nianji
leaving.
had waited at the entrance of Mei Xiaowen's apartment
You
complex
don't need me
for
to
more than
teach you
2
what to
hours
say and
before
what not
going
to
in.
say,
Do you?
Then she came out in less than half
Sister
an hour
Zhelan
and walked alone on the streets.
Zhang Wen and Zhang Wenjie
Finally,
nodded quickly.
she sat at a remote bus
They
stop
didn't
for
dare
a few
to gossip
hours.
anymore.
Hu Xiaoheng clenched his
carried
fists
Gu
and
Nianji
then
back
relaxed
to his
them.
bedroom.
His
Seeing that she
expression
was
was one of
barefoot,
extreme
he
restraint.
quickly held her foot and rubbed it
He
for
sat
her.
behind his desk and
He
hesitated
sat diagonally
for a while.
on his bed and held her in his arms.
finger hovered over the mouse and
He
finally
comforted her
clicked on a
softly.
program.
It's okay. It's
The
okay
program
now.
connected directly to the
Gu
Nandu
Nianji
satellite
clutched the
navigation
collar of
system.
Hu Xiaoheng's pajamas tightly.
Using the program,
he could
she
check
couldn't
the
stop
actual
shivering.
situation around the world at
She
that
felt
moment.
so cold.
He entered the
She
coordinates
desperately
he found
wanted
from
to get
Gu
closer
Nianji's
to the
phone
source of
signal
heat.
and activated the real-time
Hu
satellite
Xiaoheng's body
tracking
was
system.
like a furnace. The Nandu
How
program
could
on
she
the
resist
computer
a
screen
furnace on a
gradually
winter's
showed
night?
the night view of the
Gu
Imperial
Nianji
capital.
snuggled even tighter
Hu
against
Xiaoheng
Xiaoheng.
kept clicking and zooming
Hu
in on the
Xiaoheng's
image.
body suddenly stiffened.
He watched as the brilliant
He
light
looked up at the
slowly
ceiling
turned
of the
into a
bedroom.
realistic street mirror.
He took a deep breath
The remote
and pursed
bus
his
stop
lips.
gradually appeared on the computer
He shifted
screen
back
in front of Hu
slightly to
Xiaoheng.
distance his suddenly protruding
He saw
body
a
from the
lonely
soft
figure
body
sitting on his
bench.
arms.
It
His
was
large
snowing
hand
and the image
continued
was
to
covered
soothe
in
Gu Nianji's
snowflakes.
back. The
It
figure was
finally
also
calmed her
covered in a
nerves.
layer of snow.
Gu Nianji sobbed.
Suddenly, the figure looked up
Hu
at the night
Xiao,
sky.
Someone's
Someone's in my
Xiaoheng
bedroom.
could almost see
Hu
through the
Xiaoheng
blurry
nodded.
image to see her large,
Don't be afraid.
dark eyes gazing at him
I'll
in the
go
lonely
take a
night.
look. In that
turned
instant,
to leave.
he felt like someone had
Don't
grabbed
leave
his
me
heart
here
and
alone.
twisted it.
Gu
The
Nianji
pain
panicked.
and numbness intertwined.
She grabbed Hu Xiaoheng's
He couldn't
shirt.
tell what he was thinking,
I'm
but his
scared.
phone had already connected to
She was
Yin Xixiang's
unfamiliar
number.
with the place. Find me a private
Although this was
plane.
Xiaoheng's home,
I want
she
to go to
still
the
couldn't
capital
relax her
immediately.
nerves.
Yes,
Coupled with the inexplicable fright she had just received,
she
immediately
wasn't used to the
agreed and
environment.
quickly coordinated with the various
Xiaoheng
personnel.
thought
about it. Not only did
took
they
out a
find a
pair of
private
slippers,
plane, but they also
put
arranged
them
the
on.
flight route. Come with me to
So
your bedroom.
after midnight in Sea City, a private
sniffed.
military plane rose
She
into the
grabbed
air
his sleeve and
sped
got off
towards
the
the
bed.
imperial capital.
She put on
It only
Xiaoheng's
took an
large
hour for the
slippers and
private
followed him
military
out.
plane to land at the
The
imperial
slippers were
capital
too big for
international airport.
Gunyanji.
Half
As
an
she
hour
walked
later,
over,
a
all she
convoy
could
of
hear was
military
the sound of the
vehicles was
slippers
already on the
flapping against
highway
each
and
other.
driving towards the third ring
Xiaoheng
road in the
didn't
city.
mind.
Gu
He took
Nianji
Gu
sat
Nianji's
alone on a
hand and
bench at
walked
the
to
bus
Gu
stop.
Nianji's bedroom on the other
Her
side of the
entire
living
body
room.
was freezing,
A
but
few
she still
orderlies
didn't want to go
overheard them in the
anywhere.
living room.
She only
They
felt
looked
that the
down to
road
see
ahead of
Gu
her was
Nianji
bumpy
wearing
and
such a large
unclear.
pair of men's slippers.
She was a person with no
They wanted
past
to
and no
laugh.
future.
Follow
The
me.
world was so big.
Hua Xiaoheng didn't
Where
look
was
back.
there a place for an orphan like her to
Yes.
go?
Just when her
arrived
mood
at Gu
was at its
Nianji's
lowest,
bedroom,
a
Hua
string of
Xiaoheng
flashing
walked in
headlights
first.
suddenly shone from the
The
other
living
side of the
room was
long
fine,
street.
but the bedroom was
She
dark.
instinctively raised her arm
Hua
to shield her
Xiaoheng turned
eyes,
on the light at
but
the
from
door.
the corner of her eye,
She
saw
saw
a
a
majestic
majestic convoy
convoy driving
driving
towards her.
There were no
Why would there
signs
be
of
a convoy
outsiders
passing
entering
by
the room
so late at night?
The floor-to-ceiling
Gu Nianji
curtains were
lowered her
lowered,
arm
and the
looked up to see
floor-to-ceiling
that the
windows
license
were
plate
tightly
at the
shut.
front of the car was a
A
military
corner
vehicle.
of the blanket on her bed was
her
lifted.
heart skipped a beat,
It
and
was
then it
probably
almost stopped
because she
for a
had
few
gotten up in a
minutes.
hurry.
In those
Gu
few
Nianji
minutes,
followed
she saw
in
the
and saw the
convoy slowly
situation.
stop on the road in front of her.
She said in shock,
In the
"I-
middle, a very luxurious
I-
car with an unknown
I
brand
clearly
stopped
saw
right
someone
in front
sitting
of her.
at the head of my bed.
The car door opened,
It's a
and
woman.
a tall figure got out of the car.
She's very beautiful."
He stood in front of the
This
car
was the
door
second
and
chapter
looked at
of
her.
2 chapters in one, including the second added chapter of Bookworm's July 1688 Spiritual Pet Fate. "I'm too sleepy. I'll edit it tomorrow. That's it for today. It's the end of the month. Everyone, please vote for the Major General." Chapter 196. Did he have a nightmare? One of the orderlies behind him muttered in a low voice. He also found it a little unbelievable. They had been orderlies in the Hua Manor for many years, but this was the first time they had encountered something like this. There were strict security measures both inside and outside the house, and no outsider had ever broken in. How could a woman have suddenly broken through their defenses? Gu Nianji walked to her bed in a daze and pulled back the quilt that was only partially uncovered. She discovered that the sheets were as smooth as if no one had slept in them. She knew what was going on and turned to look at Hua Xiaoheng sternly. "Uncle Hua, do you trust me?" "I do." Hua Xiaoheng stood at the bedroom door with his hands behind his back. He did not walk to Gu Nianji's bed, but instead walked towards the French curtains on the south wall of the bedroom. Lifting a corner of the curtains, Hua Xiaoheng placed his hand on the handle of the French window and gently pushed it open a crack. The cold wind and flying snow immediately rushed into the bedroom. "The window is open." Hua Xiaoheng turned to look at the orderlies. "Who cleaned this room today?" The orderlies shook their heads. "Sir, the servants cleaned this room. We don't do this." They were only responsible for the safety of 2 military figures in the Hua family, grandfather Hua Xuanong, the retired former vice president of the military, and his son, Hua Guanchen, the current director of the military political department. Their meals were prepared by special orderlies, and they did not eat with the rest of the Hua family. Now that Hua Xiaoheng was back, the orderlies had one more person to serve. Gu Nianji was not a member of the military, so her affairs should be taken care of by the Hua family servants. Hua Xiaoheng turned to look out the window. He remembered that along the flower bed and garden, there was a line of iron street lamps that illuminated the area. It was as bright as day at night, so the curtains in the Hua Manor had to be strictly shaded. But now all the street lamps outside were out. This was no ordinary occurrence. Why are the street lamps outside gone? Hua Xiaoheng quietly closed the window and locked it. He lowered the curtains and turned to look at the orderlies. The leader of the orderlies was pale. He had not noticed this problem. The small suite that Gu Nianji lived in was a corner of the Hua Manor that had been empty for a long time. No one had lived in it for more than a decade. This time, Hua Xiaoheng had ordered someone to call back at the last minute to say that he was going home for the new year, so the Hua family had hurriedly packed. The street lamp outside the suite was not in an important position, so it did not matter whether it was on or off. But today was different. "Chief, you mean, someone came in through the floor-to-ceiling window?" The leader of the orderlies quickly saluted. "I'll get someone to fix the street lamps." Hua Xiaoheng waved his hand as if he didn't want to pursue the matter. "I'll fix it tomorrow." Lock this place and don't let anyone near. Yes, Chief. Hua Xiaoheng walked to Gu Nianji's side. Pack your things and stay at my place. Gu Nianji couldn't have asked for more. She rushed to the bathroom to put her toiletries back into her suitcase and followed Hua Xiaoheng out. Hua Xiaoheng walked a few steps and heard the sound of her slippers and the rumbling of her suitcase on the floor. He turned around and took the suitcase from her hand. With the other hand, he held her hand and led her into his suite. The door to the suite slammed shut. Of course, the orderlies didn't follow them in. They discussed it and sent a few people to guard the door to Gu Nianji's room and not let anyone near. Gu Nianji followed Hua Xiaoheng into his suite and finally had the time to look around. Hua Xiaoheng had carried her in earlier and had gone straight to his master bedroom. She hadn't had a chance to take a good look around. What are you looking at? Aren't you going to sleep? Hua Xiaoheng pointed to his bedroom. You sleep there. I'll sleep in the guest bedroom. His suite had 3 bedrooms and 2 living rooms. There was a master bedroom with a bathroom, 2 guest bedrooms that shared a bathroom, a spacious living room that served as the living room, and a fully equipped study. Gu Nianji refused. She lowered her head and followed Hua Xiaoheng. She whispered, Uncle Hua, do you really believe me? Yes, go to sleep first. We'll talk tomorrow. Hua Xiaoheng saw that she wasn't moving. He picked up her suitcase with one hand and held her arm with the other. He carried her to his master bedroom. He put down the suitcase and led Gu Nianji to his king-sized bed. Don't think about it. Go to sleep. But I really saw it. It wasn't a dream. Gu Nianji looked up and grabbed Hua Xiaoheng's wrist. And after I ran out, someone came into my bedroom. How do you know? Because the sheets were too smooth. Gu Nianji was still trembling. She stuttered as she spoke. I jumped out of bed and didn't even turn around to tidy the sheets. But when I went in just now, Uncle Hua saw it too. The sheets were neatly laid out. Only one corner was lifted. And I remember I got up in such a hurry that when I ran out, I dragged half the sheets to the floor. Hua Xiaoheng looked at her and listened to her quietly. His dark eyes were like jade and contained a hidden brilliance. He seemed to understand everything, but perhaps he didn't care. When she finished, Hua Xiaoheng moved past her and bent down to shake the sheets off the bed. He saw that there were some wrinkles on his sheets. Yes, this was the look of someone who had gotten out of bed in a hurry. Gu Nianji's bed must have been rearranged. Hua Xiaoheng quietly put her on the bed and covered her with the blanket. Be good. Go to sleep. Gu Nianji had no choice but to close her eyes. She felt Hua Xiaoheng leave the master bedroom and turn off the lights at the door before leaving. After he left, Gu Nianji opened her eyes in the darkness. If she slept alone, she was used to having a night light on. She couldn't sleep alone in the complete darkness. She tossed and turned in bed for a long time, but still couldn't fall asleep. She was also a little scared. Gu Nianji couldn't understand why something like this had happened to her first night at the Hua Manor. She recalled the woman in the white robe over and over again. She couldn't shake the feeling that she looked familiar. She had a very good memory. She could almost remember everything she saw. She had caught a glimpse of the woman in the dark, but she still firmly remembered some of the typical features of the woman's appearance. For example, her eyes were long and narrow, and her eyelashes must have been very thick. She remembered that when she looked down at her, her eyes looked like they were lined with eyeliner. Her nose was high and exquisite. It was the smoothest line. The shape of her lips was beautiful, and her skin color must have been very, very fair. Because under the dim light, Gu Nianji only thought that the woman was as white as snow. She was so beautiful that she couldn't speak. There seemed to be a timid expression on her face, but there was also curiosity. When she reached out, she probably didn't have any ill intentions towards her, right? Gu Nianji turned in bed again. She really couldn't fall asleep. Finally, she sat up and punched the bed helplessly. Then she hugged her head and spaced out. Hu Xiaoheng didn't fall asleep in the second bedroom. He could hear the slightest movement next door because he hadn't closed the door. Finally, he heard the sound of Gu Nianji punching the bed. He also couldn't fall asleep. He lifted the blankets and got up. He went to his master bedroom and turned on the lights. He saw Gu Nianji sitting on the bed hugging her legs and resting her head between her knees. Gu Nianji sensed someone coming in and immediately looked up in alarm. The lights immediately came on. Hu Xiaoheng was already walking over from the master bedroom door. Can't sleep. Choosing a bed. Hu Xiaoheng sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress actually sank deeply, and Gu Nianji felt that her center of gravity was about to be unstable. She moved closer to Hu Xiaoheng and muttered, "It's too dark in the room." Hu Xiaoheng's master bedroom, whether it was the ceiling lamp or the bedside lamp, were very bright. There weren't any dim yellow night lights that were specially used at night. Gu Nianji had fallen asleep in the suite earlier because she was tired and sleepy, but she hadn't slept for long before she started dreaming. Now that she had been messing around for a long time, she was almost awake. "I'll get someone to buy night lights tomorrow." Hu Xiaoheng lifted the blankets. "Go to sleep." Gu Nianji had no choice but to slide back under the blankets and look at Hu Xiaoheng eagerly. "Then can you not leave?" This was the first update. Today's second update was also 2 updates in one, including the first update to reward GU, or Spiritual Pet Fate. It was around 1 in the afternoon. It's the end of the month. Dear friends, vote for the Major General with your monthly and recommendation votes. Oh, ___, oh. Chapter 197. Hu Xiaoheng stared at Gu Nianji for a while without blinking. The silence in the bedroom was frighteningly quiet. Gu Nianji blinked and finally couldn't stand Hu Xiaoheng's stare. She looked away at the French curtains on the south wall and muttered, "You have a French window here too." "I'm scared." Hu Xiaoheng turned to look and adjusted the blankets for her. "That window is bulletproof glass. Don't be scared." Gu Nianji was speechless. She closed her eyes in defeat and didn't speak again. But a hand quietly reached out from under the blankets and grabbed the corner of Hu Xiaoheng's pajamas. Hu Xiaoheng felt it as soon as he got up. He looked down at the fair hand and after a long time, he took it and put it back under the blankets. "I'm not leaving. I'll sleep on the sofa." Hu Xiaoheng's master bedroom was much larger than the one in Gu Nianji's small suite. Not only was there a desk opposite the bed, but there was also a large sofa. Gu Nianji sighed in relief and quietly opened her eyes to see Hu Xiaoheng go to the second bedroom next door to bring a blanket and pillow over. He placed it on the sofa and turned off the lights before falling asleep. Gu Nianji's nervousness quickly disappeared with Hu Xiaoheng's company in the bedroom. Drowsiness hit her like a mountain and she fell asleep almost as soon as she tilted her head. Hu Xiaoheng looked in Gu Nianji's direction from the sofa, his gaze deep and unreadable. After a long time, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. The next morning, Hu Xiaoheng woke up at 7. He was used to waking up at 6, but because he had slept late the night before, he slept an extra hour. He took his clothes to the bathroom to wash up. When he came out, he saw Gu Nianji sleeping soundly under the blankets. Her little face was blushing, so red that it wasn't normal. Hu Xiaoheng's heart skipped a beat. He reached out to touch Gu Nianji's forehead and found that she really had a fever. Remembering that Gu Nianji hadn't locked the French window in her bedroom yesterday, Hu Xiaoheng knew that Gu Nianji must have caught a cold then been frightened, so she couldn't handle the fever. Gu Nianji rarely got sick and usually managed to handle a fever. Hu Xiaoheng rarely let her take medicine. He only called Chen Lai to ask him what degree her fever needed to be sent to the hospital. Chenlai was very surprised that Gu Nianji had fallen sick as soon as she went to the Hua residence. He quickly said, anyone else would have been sent to the hospital if they were 39 degrees Celsius. Nianji didn't make it to 40 degrees. Nonsense, Hua Xiaoheng retorted. At 40 degrees Celsius, even if he could carry it, he would be confused. You, a Mongolian doctor, should really go back to the furnace and be reborn. Chenlai hated it when people questioned his professionalism. He was furious and rolled up his sleeves, ready to argue with Hua Xiaoheng. However, Hua Xiaoheng immediately hung up and blocked Chenlai's number so that he could not harass him. Hua Xiaoheng found a thermometer to measure the temperature of Gu Nianji's forehead. He found that it was less than 39 degrees, so he set it aside and went out for breakfast. Eldest cousin brother, you're awake. Where is Miss Gu? Hua Jialan was instructing the servants to prepare breakfast. I'm not sure what Miss Gu likes, so I asked Madame Chen to make a few dishes according to the Sea City cuisine. See if she likes it. Hua Xiaoheng wore casual clothes at home, a simple white shirt over a black t-shirt. The hem was tucked under a black military leather belt, and custom-made black wool trousers made his legs look longer. At 1.88 meters, he was much taller than Zhang Wenjie, who had just come in. Zhang Wenjie was 1.75 meters, not short, but in front of Hua Xiaoheng, he was not tall enough. His body was thin and frail, like a child's. He was a bit afraid to see Hua Xiaoheng, so he greeted him carefully and found a seat far away from him to sit down. Hua Xiaoheng nodded at Zhang Wenjie in a rare and pleasant manner and said, "Good morning." He then sat down and looked at the fried buns, rice balls, glutinous rice porridge, youtiao, and soy milk on the table. He even bowed to Hua Jialan and said, "Thank you." He then asked Zhang Wenjie, "Do you want some?" Zhang Wenjie, who had just arrived at the dining room, saw this scene and her eyes almost fell to the floor. The current eldest cousin brother was completely different from how he was 6 years ago. In the past, he would not even look them in the eye, but now he was so polite to Zhang Wenjie and Hua Jialan. Of course, perhaps it was because he had become a high-ranking official that he knew how to hide his emotions, and used superficial courtesy to hide all his true emotions. Zhang Wenjie understood this point. She walked over with a conflicted expression and nodded to Hua Xiaoheng, "Good morning, eldest cousin brother." Hua Xiaoheng turned to look at her, "Morning." Zhang Wenjie sat down next to Zhang Wenjie and glanced at him. Zhang Wenjie shrugged and made an, "I don't know," gesture, then looked at Hua Xiaoheng, "Eldest cousin brother, where's Miss Gu? Why isn't she out for breakfast?" Hua Jialan also wanted to ask, "The fried buns won't taste good when they get cold." Before Hua Xiaoheng could answer, the orderlies had already brought his special breakfast over. His meals were specially prepared by the army orderlies, and even the kitchen stove was in a different place from the rest of the Hua family. Looking at the large medium-rare steak, cheese pancakes, and a plate of beef buns, Hua Jialan's mouth twitched. "Eldest cousin brother, it's not good to eat this early in the morning. High calorie, high fat, and high protein could also lead to high blood fat and cholesterol." However, she had not considered that with Hua Xiaoheng's daily activities in the army, he had to eat like this to ensure his nutrition. Hua Xiaoheng did not explain further, he only said dryly, "I've been eating like this ever since I joined the army." Zhang Wenjie was extremely envious. Looking at his bread and bacon, he wanted nothing more than to have a steak or beef buns. Hua Xiaoheng saw his envious gaze and pushed the fried bun in front of him. "Wenjie, eat this." Zhang Wenjie was flattered, "Is this really for me? Not for Miss Gu. She's sick, she doesn't eat these things." Hua Xiaoheng picked up his knife and fork to cut the steak as he instructed the orderlies beside him, "Call the army doctor over to treat Nianji. She'll be eating with me from now on, remember to make her an extra portion." The orderlies hurriedly agreed, then asked, "What does Miss Gu like?" "Fresher would be good. Now that she's sick, we can make it a little stronger." Hu Xiaoheng instructed casually as he quickly finished the steak and started on the beef buns. Hu Jialan rubbed her hands anxiously. Eldest cousin brother, Miss Gu is sick. What illness? Fever. She caught a cold last night. Hu Xiaoheng finished his breakfast and drank a cup of coffee before standing up. Enjoy your meal. When the Zhang siblings' father, Zhang Baoqin, and mother, Qian Shihui, came in, Hu Xiaoheng had just walked out of the dining room. Uncle Zhang, Aunt Zhang. He bowed slightly and paused in his steps before leaving. Hu Jialan also greeted Zhang Baoqin and Qian Shihui before carrying a box of breakfast upstairs. Hu Xiaoheng returned to his suite and turned on his computer to work for a while before he heard the doorbell ring. The intercom said that the army doctor had arrived. Hu Xiaoheng got up to open the door and welcomed a female army doctor. Zitan. Hu Xiaoheng was a bit surprised. Why are you here? Nianji is coming to the imperial capital to study, so Chenlai sent me here a long time ago. Yi Zitan smiled, but we didn't expect her to fall sick as soon as she arrived. Hu Xiaoheng understood now. He must have called Chenlai and told him about Nianji's fever, so Chenlai immediately notified Yi Zitan, who was already in the imperial capital. Chenlai had always been Gu Nianji's doctor, with Yi Zitan helping occasionally. Yi Zitan walked in and took out a thermometer and stethoscope from the medical kit. She checked Nianji's temperature for a long time before saying, she should be fine, it's 38.5 degrees now. Hu Xiaoheng nodded. It was 39 degrees earlier, so it looks like the fever has subsided. Yi Zitan agreed, it's best if the fever subsides on its own. If it doesn't, then take the medicine. I'll leave the fever medicine here, just in case. Knowing that Nianji was fine, Hu Xiaoheng went to the study to work. But not long after he went in, Hu Jialan said over the intercom that she had something to say to him. Hu Xiaoheng opened the door to let her in, and the two of them talked in the small living room. Cousin brother, Nianji stayed with you yesterday. Hu Jialan poked her head in the direction of Hu Xiaoheng's bedroom. Yeah, she'll be staying here from now on. Hu Xiaoheng didn't say anything else. It's only for a little over a week. That's not a good idea. Hu Jialan objected tactfully. Although cousin brother is Miss Gu's guardian, Miss Gu is already 18 years old. She's a big girl, and she's living with you. What's wrong with that? Hu Xiaoheng didn't bat an eyelid. He didn't seem to care at all. Her condition is special, she can't be frightened. This is certified by the doctor. Can't be frightened. Hu Jialan was taken aback. Does she also have? She doesn't. Hu Xiaoheng cut her off without hesitation, his gaze becoming stern. She's just timid, and she's still a young girl. Don't think so dirty. Hu Jialan almost choked on Hu Xiaoheng's words like she had swallowed a fly. She stood up abruptly and clenched her fists angrily. Then I'm sorry to bother you. Cousin brother, I'm doing this for your own good. You're a major general, you can't make mistakes. There are so many eyes on you. I know. Hu Xiaoheng said dryly, you don't have to worry about me. Get out. Hu Jialan tried to persuade him a bit more, but Hu Xiaoheng had already gone to the study without looking back, leaving Hu Jialan alone in the living room. She remained silent for a while, but didn't dare go to Hu Xiaoheng's bedroom to look for Gu Nianji. In the end, she left sullenly. Gu Nianji slept until the sun was setting, and only woke up at almost 5 p.m. She was drenched in sweat, and her fever had completely subsided, but her body was still sweaty and uncomfortable. Her mind was still groggy from the fever, and she sat up lazily to stretch. She took off her sweaty pajamas. Hu Xiaoheng heard her wake up, and quickly walked in to tell her something, but saw her fair breasts jiggling like a bunny when he entered the room. He immediately turned and backed away, closing the bedroom door tightly at the same time. When Gu Nianji heard the sound of the door closing, she realized that she wasn't in her own bedroom, but Hu Xiaoheng's. She quickly put on her sweaty pajamas and got out of bed to open the bedroom door. Uncle Hu, what's up? Hua Xiaoheng stood with his back to her. He didn't even turn around when he heard her come out. He said, "It's already evening. Hurry up and get changed for dinner." With that, he walked directly to the study and slammed the door shut. Gu Nianji was a bit surprised. "It's already evening. Did I sleep the whole day?" Seeing that the door to Hua Xiaoheng's study was tightly shut, she didn't want to disturb him. She quickly found her suitcase, opened it, and took out her underwear and jacket. She carried them to the bathroom to shower. When she came out, she found that the door to Hua Xiaoheng's study was already open, but he wasn't inside. He must have gone to eat dinner. Gu Nianji found her slippers and put them on. She also left Hua Xiaoheng's suite to go to the dining room for dinner. It was the time for the orderlies to change shifts. When Gu Nianji came out, she didn't see anyone standing guard at the door. She followed the path she remembered and walked to the living room. If she remembered correctly, the dining room was on the other side of the living room. She walked down a long hallway and was about to turn right when she caught a glimpse of a woman wearing a complicated pink cardigan and a pink wool skirt standing at the end of a small alley on her left. She took a few steps forward and suddenly remembered something. She whipped her head around to look again. That woman was clearly the woman in the white robe who had appeared in her bedroom yesterday. Gu Nianji blinked. The woman was still standing in front of the window at the end of the alley, looking at her with a smile. "Who are you?" Gu Nianji couldn't help but walk over. "Are you also a member of the Hua family?" As she walked closer, Gu Nianji discovered that the woman was a bit older, but she was definitely no older than 30. She had delicate and fair skin, bright and moving features, and a bit of innocence and shyness in her expression. She looked like an 18 or 19-year-old girl. If it weren't for the slight crow's feet at the corners of her eyes, Gu Nianji really would have thought the woman was her age. The woman saw Gu Nianji walk over and said quietly, "Your dress is so pretty." Gu Nianji had just changed into a light purple Chanel sheath dress she had taken out of her suitcase. Naturally, Chanel's clothes were different. Young people didn't look old in them, and older people looked elegant and calm in them, making it impossible to tell their age. Gu Nianji looked at the woman's envious eyes and smiled. "You're so pretty. I've never seen someone so beautiful. Are you a member of the Hua family?" The woman blinked. "A member of the Hua family?" A faint blush appeared on her face, and her voice grew softer. "I want to be a member of the Hua family too. But Guanchen said I can't get married until I'm 18. I have to wait until I'm 22, Gu Nianji froze. Guanchen. If she remembered correctly, Hua Xiaoheng's father was Hua Guanchen. But this woman, no matter how she looked at it, was older than 18. You're saying you're only 18. That's why you can't get married? Gu Nianji asked suspiciously. What's your name? Were you the one who went to my bedroom yesterday? The woman tilted her head and thought about it. What's my name? I'm Song Jining. Yes, that's my name. I went to your bedroom. No, that's my own room. Gu Nianji was surprised. Remembering that she was going to have dinner, she said to the woman, Miss Song, right? Have you had dinner? Come have dinner with me. As she spoke, she extended her hand to Song Jining. Song Jining hesitated, but still slowly reached out to take Gu Nianji's hand. Her hand was indeed very cold. Gu Nianji led her to the dining room. They walked into the dining room hand in hand, and everyone inside stood up in shock. Hua Jialan even rushed over and took Song Jining's hand from Gu Nianji's. Second aunt, why are you here again? She then scolded the servants. How are you working? You can't even look after a patient. This was the second update, and also the first two updates combined, including the first update to reward Jiyu, Chiwe, the leader of the alliance. It's the end of the month, so please vote for the Major General. Oh, intersection. Oh. Chapter 198. Song Jining looked extremely uneasy. Her beautiful phoenix eyes quickly welled up with tears. She looked like she was about to burst into tears. She timidly glanced at Huo Guanchen, but Huo Guanchen was still sitting next to Grandfather Huo with a frown on his face. He had no intention of looking at her. Song Jining's eyes became even more watery. Auntie Xing, Auntie Yu, hurry up and take second aunt upstairs. Huo Jialan scrambled to take Song Jining away. Gu Nianji couldn't help being shocked when she heard Huo Jialan call her second aunt. Huo Xiaoheng's father, Huo Guanchen, was Huo Jialan's second uncle. So this second aunt was Huo Guanchen's wife. Looking at her age, she couldn't be older than 30. So she couldn't be Huo Xiaoheng's biological mother. Gu Nianji's mind raced as she stole a glance at Huo Xiaoheng. Huo Xiaoheng was sitting with his back to them. He didn't turn around, so Gu Nianji couldn't see his expression. She only felt his back straighten. Gu Nianji rarely saw Huo Xiaoheng so serious. She turned to look at Song Jining again. Song Jining saw that Gu Nianji was the only one in the room looking at her intently. She looked at her pleadingly. Gu Nianji was no stranger to this kind of panicked and helpless expression. When she had just narrowly escaped a car accident, she often saw herself in the mirror with this kind of panicked expression. It was like she didn't fit in with the world. She instinctively squeezed Song Jining's hand and turned to Huo Jialan. She asked gently, Sister Lan, what illness does Mrs. Hua have? I don't think she has a fever. In Gu Nianji's mind, only a fever could be considered an illness. Huo Jialan stared at Gu Nianji in shock for a while before shaking her head. She doesn't have a fever, but she's definitely sick. Really? Gu Nianji pitied Song Jining even more. What illness? I'm not sick. Song Jining muttered indignantly. I'm not sick. She repeated to Gu Nianji. Tears were about to fall from her eyes, but she insisted that she wasn't sick. Yes, I believe you. Gu Nianji squeezed her hand again and felt that she was probably the only one who didn't know about this. No one in the restaurant spoke, so they were probably really sick. However, looking at the woman's expression, Gu Nianji really couldn't think of what kind of illness could be like this. Song Jining could speak clearly, recognize the road, and talk to people. If she was mentally ill, it would be impossible. Gu Nianji had seen Chen Lai's cameo as a psychiatrist before, so she had read many psychology books. She was no stranger to the evaluation and diagnosis of mental illness. Do you really believe me? Song Jining was a little excited. Do you really believe me? Before Gu Nianji could reply, Huo Jialan suddenly asked, Second aunt, how old are you? 18. I'm 18. What's wrong? Song Jining looked at Huo Jialan in confusion. Haven't you asked me that many times? Huo Jialan crossed her arms and looked at Gu Nianji. She raised her chin. See? That's her illness. I still don't understand. Gu Nianji shook her head. Can you explain more? My second aunt thinks she's always 18. It's been more than a decade, and she hasn't changed. My second aunt is actually almost 50 years old. Huo Jialan didn't expect Gu Nianji to be so insistent. She thought Gu Nianji was being too nosy and frowned. However, she still explained Song Jining's illness. In front of so many members of the Huo family, Song Jining was already giving Huo Xiaoheng face by not saying that she was mentally ill. However, Gu Nianji wasn't stupid, so she should be able to understand what she was implying, right? So her real age was almost 50. That must be Huo Xiaoheng's biological mother. Gu Nianji smiled and said to Huo Jialan, Are you serious? If this is an illness, then almost all women in the world are mentally ill. What do you mean? This time it was Hu Jialan's turn to be confused. She had clearly said it, so why didn't Gu Nianji understand? The Hu family had hidden Song Jining well all these years and hired people to take care of her. They didn't want her to go out and embarrass herself. You don't understand. Gu Nianji pulled Song Jining's hand away from Hu Jialan's and said with a smile, "Don't most women think they'll always be 18? It's just that most people don't say it out loud." Gu Nianji held Song Jining's hand and said with a smile, "I'm the same as you. I also want to be 18 forever. Don't worry, I'll be sick with you." Song Jining's uneasiness was immediately alleviated. She immediately felt wronged. "Really? You're 18 too? That's great. I tell them so many times every day, but they don't believe me. They even say I'm sick." Her eyes were rimmed with tears. Yes, of course I believe you. These people don't understand the world of the forever 18-year-olds. But it's okay, who needs them to understand? Whatever we say is what we say. If you say you're 18, then you're 18. Whoever doesn't believe me can hang themselves. Who cares about them? Song Jining was ecstatic when she heard Gu Nianji's words. She wrapped both hands around Gu Nianji's hand and said, "No need to hang yourself. Even if you don't believe me, you don't have to hang yourself. I just want one person to believe me. I believe you completely." Gu Nianji pulled Song Jining to the dining table and said, "Come, have dinner with everyone. If anyone says you're sick, I'll take care of them for you." She glanced at Hu Jialan with a smile. Hu Jialan shook her head with a wry smile. She walked over to Grandfather Hua and Hu Guanchen and said awkwardly, "Grandfather, second uncle, what do you think we should do? Second aunt's illness has never been good, and now someone is adding fuel to the fire and going crazy with her. Won't it worsen her illness?" "I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy." Song Jining screamed, clutching her head. Perhaps it was the word crazy that Hu Jialan had said that agitated her. Gu Nianji quickly coaxed her, Okay, you're not crazy, you're not crazy." Song Jining immediately snuggled into Gu Nianji's arms and trembled. "Sister Lan, don't say that. I really don't think it's crazy to think that you'll always be 18. Gu Nianji shot Hu Jialan a disapproving look and immediately changed the subject. "Sister Lan, hurry up and serve the dishes. Everyone's hungry. What's for dinner?" Gu Nianji's seat was next to Hu Xiaoheng, so the seat next to her was given to Song Jining. Song Jining sat on the other side of Zhang Wenna. She watched with interest as Gu Nianji coaxed Song Jining, and looked meaningfully at her parents. The corners of Hu Jialan's mouth twitched. She hadn't expected Gu Nianji to turn the tables so quickly, but she didn't mind and immediately ordered the kitchen to serve the dishes. She walked over to Hu Xiaoheng and whispered, "Cousin brother, shouldn't you discipline Miss Gu a little?" Hu Xiaoheng's gaze had been fixed on Gu Nianji, and when he heard Hu Jialan's words, he raised his hand in objection. "No need. Serve the dishes." Gu Nianji gently patted Song Jining's back as she spoke to her softly. Song Jining gradually calmed down and sat up straight. She smiled at Gu Nianji fawningly and asked, "What do you like to eat?" "I know how to cook. I'll make it for you tomorrow." Gu Nianji quickly nodded. "I must try Mrs. Hua's cooking tomorrow." Song Jining blushed slightly and quickly glanced at Hu Guanchen sitting across from her. She leaned over to Gu Nianji's ear and whispered, "I'm not married yet, so I'm not Mrs. Hua yet." She paused, then continued shyly, "But I'm very happy that you call me Mrs. Hua." Her pale cheeks were flushed, and her eyes were like limpid autumn waters, sparkling. She looked like a young girl who had just fallen in love. Gu Nianji looked at her skin and remembered Hu Jialan saying Song Jining was almost 50. She asked enviously, "Mrs. Hua, you take care of your skin so well. How do you do it? Can you share?" Song Jining was particularly interested in this topic and rambled on about how to take care of her skin. She then asked Gu Nianji about the brand of clothes and where she bought them. Gu Nianji discussed clothes, shoes, and bags enthusiastically with her, and suddenly discovered that they had a lot in common. It was her first time at the He residence, and she didn't know that this was the first time Song Jining had spoken so much in over a decade since she got sick. Moreover, her manner and intonation were completely normal. Grandfather Hua and He Guanchen were both shocked and looked at them with complicated expressions. Finally, they looked at He Xiaoheng. This was the first update. Today's second update was also two updates in one, including the second update to reward Gu, and Chiue for the spiritual pet affinity. It was around 1 p.m. Today is Monday, my dear friends, let's vote for the Major General. Especially the recommendation votes. Thank you very much. Chapter 199. The corners of He Xiaoheng's lips relaxed, but there was no obvious smile. Sensing Grandfather Hua and He Guanchen looking at him, He Xiaoheng looked up to meet their gazes. What's up? Grandfather He wanted to say something, but seeing He Xiaoheng's protective expression, he could only swallow his words and pick up his chopsticks. Let's eat, everyone. Let's eat, let's eat. He Guanchen, Uncle Zhang and Aunt Zhang quickly picked up their chopsticks as well. Zhang Wenna and Zhang Wenjie smiled and whispered to Gu Nianji, Miss Gu, let's eat. The He family had a strict rule of not talking while eating. Gu Nianji used to be like this when she was with He Xiaoheng, but this time she was chatting happily with Song Jining and reluctantly picked up her chopsticks. Song Jining heard it and whispered to Gu Nianji with a smile, let's talk after dinner. Okay. Gu Nianji nodded firmly. There were dozens of dishes on the rectangular walnut table, but each had their own place. Grandfather Hua, He Guanchen and He Xiaoheng each had 3 dishes and 1 soup in front of them, so they had to eat by themselves. Gu Nianji also had 3 dishes and 1 soup in front of her, which He Xiaoheng had specifically instructed his orderlies to make. Everyone else had the He family's cook. Song Jining's food was usually served upstairs, but this time, Gu Nianji asked her to stay and brought the food over. Gu Nianji looked at Song Jining carefully and saw that she ate very elegantly. She pursed her lips tightly as she chewed and ate in small mouthfuls. She also used chopsticks skillfully. The way she ate was very similar to He Xiaoheng. Gu Nianji had learned the way she ate from He Xiaoheng. Now that she was sitting next to Song Jining, she suddenly realized where He Xiaoheng had learned his eating habits from. Thinking about how He Xiaoheng's mother had become like this, Gu Nianji suddenly felt depressed and only ate quietly. She didn't want to talk even when drinking tea after eating. Song Jining had finally found someone who was willing to talk to her and listen to her after all these years, so she was very attached to Gu Nianji. She looked at her eagerly and even personally picked up the red clay teapot to pour tea for her. Gu Nianji was shocked and quickly took the teapot. Mrs. Hua, let me do it. Song Jining smiled at her. What's your name? My name is Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji looked down to pour tea for Song Jining, then poured a cup for herself. Just as she was about to drink, He Xiaoheng took the teacup from her hand and said dryly, You're going to sleep at night, so you shouldn't drink tea. Gu Nianji replied with an oh, and remembered that she had slept the entire day. If she still drank tea now, she wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. Thus, she stopped drinking. Song Jining looked at He Xiaoheng shyly, then whispered in Gu Nianji's ear, Is he your boyfriend? Gu Nianji was speechless. Her face flushed uncontrollably, and her big misty eyes looked dreamy. She looked like she was drunk. However, she could feel He Xiaoheng's gaze piercing into her back like a needle. Gu Nianji could only put on a smile that was uglier than crying and shook her head lightly. He's not my boyfriend. Then he's your husband. Song Jining asked curiously and stared at Hu Xiaoheng from head to toe. He's really good looking. He's a good match for you. Ah. Oh. Ah. Gu Nianji stared blankly at Song Jining and suddenly understood a cruel truth. Since Song Jining didn't remember being married, then she probably didn't remember having a child, right? Then did she not remember that Hu Xiaoheng was her biological son? This realization made Gu Nianji gasp. She turned around, her eyes filled with sympathy and pity as she stared at Hu Xiaoheng. Hu Xiaoheng glanced at her and instantly understood what was going on in her little head. He couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. When he was younger, he might have felt resentful because of this, but now he was so strong that he didn't need to rely on anyone or any emotions to support himself. It's getting late. Rest early. Hu Xiaoheng stood up and casually pulled Gu Nianji up. You haven't done your homework yet. School is about to start, go back and do it. Gu Nianji was tongue-tied. She really wanted to say when did she have homework. But Hu Xiaoheng glanced at her and she immediately lost her temper. She smiled sheepishly at Song Jining. Mrs. Hua, I have to go back and do my homework. I'll play with you tomorrow. Song Jining was a little afraid of Hu Xiaoheng. When he looked at her, Song Jining turned away uncomfortably. Okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Song Jining stood up as well. Hu Jialan quickly walked over to hold her arm but smiled without saying anything. She walked her upstairs. Gu Nianji politely said goodbye to Grandfather Hua and Hu Guanchen, then said goodbye to Uncle Zhang, Aunt Zhang, Zhang Wenna and Zhang Wenjie one by one before following Hu Xiaoheng back to his suite. Hu Xiaoheng closed the door as soon as they entered. The suite soundproofing was too good. Even if there was a gunfight outside, it wouldn't necessarily be heard inside. Once inside, Gu Nianji dropped her pretense and looked up at Hu Xiaoheng with displeasure. Hu Xiao, when did I have homework? Why didn't I know? Call me uncle. Hu Xiaoheng instinctively reminded her. He didn't want to argue with her about homework. It was just an excuse. He didn't need to explain. Hu Xiaoheng walked to the study alone. He reminded her, rest early. Your fever just subsided. Gu Nianji glared at Hu Xiaoheng's back. She couldn't believe he just left like that. But she didn't dare chase after him to his study. When she lived with Hu Xiaoheng in the past, his study was forbidden to her. She couldn't go there unless he told her to. Gu Nianji stomped her feet and went to the master bedroom to wash up. As she changed into her pajamas, she remembered something. She ran to Hu Xiaoheng's study and knocked on the door. Come in. The door isn't locked. Hu Xiaoheng's voice came from the study. Gu Nianji pushed the door gently. It opened. It wasn't locked. Hu Xiaoheng looked up from behind the desk. The sleeves of his white shirt were rolled up to his elbows, revealing his strong arms. The round collar of his black t-shirt revealed his exquisite collarbones. His dark, jade-like eyes looked at her quietly. What's up? Gu Nianji pointed at the black t-shirt at Hu Xiaoheng's collar. Uncle Hua, you promised to give me a few more of those t-shirts to make pajamas for when we got back. Hu Xiaoheng thought about it. I brought a few over, but they're not new. Not new. Gu Nianji's eyes lit up. Old is good. Old is more comfortable. I like old. Hu Xiaoheng looked at her in disbelief. He looked down and typed on the computer keyboard. They're in the cabinet in the master bedroom. Go look for them yourself. Gu Nianji agreed happily and turned to leave. Hu Xiaoheng suddenly remembered something. He quickly got up from behind the desk and caught up to Gu Nianji. I'll get them for you. Gu Nianji had no choice but to follow him into the master bedroom. Hu Xiaoheng personally opened the master bedroom closet and found 3 black t-shirts for her. They were all worn, but they were clean and smelled like they had been dried. You can use this closet. Hua Xiaoheng moved his things out of the right closet and stuffed them into the left one. His clothes were very simple. They were all issued by the military. There was a winter uniform, a general's uniform, and a regular uniform. His overcoat was hung separately in the other closet, so it was easy to pack. Gu Nianji brought her suitcase over and said hesitantly, "But I'll be leaving after a few days. Uncle Hua doesn't have to make room for me in the closet, right?" Hua Xiaoheng's hand paused. He pursed his lips and turned around. He said calmly, "You'll be studying for 3 years in the imperial capital. You'll have plenty of time to come back." But Gu Nianji gritted her teeth and fought back. "I'm already 18. Uncle Hua, you're no longer my guardian." "I'm not your guardian, but I'm still your uncle." Hua Xiaoheng put his hands in his trouser pockets and leaned against the closet. The white light spilled over his head, accentuating his handsome features. Gu Nianji looked at him almost greedily. She didn't dare to argue, and didn't want to. Her courage evaporated under Hua Xiaoheng's brooding gaze. She looked down and crossed her arms in front of her chest. "Fine. I'll let you go." Hua Xiaoheng saw her pitiful expression and couldn't just walk away. He thought about it and sat on the sofa. He waved at Gu Nianji. "Come here." Gu Nianji turned her head to look at him. She didn't want to go over. "Uncle Hua, what's the matter? Just tell me. I can hear you." Hua Xiaoheng didn't force her. He rubbed his temples and finally started talking about the day's events. "Nianji, about my mother." Gu Nianji perked up and walked over to sit next to Hua Xiaoheng. She took his arm and said, "Song Jining is really your mother. Your biological mother, right?" "Yes." Hua Xiaoheng leaned forward. He clasped his hands together and rested his elbows on his knees. He looked straight ahead. "Thank you for talking to her today. But don't do it again." "Why?" "Since she's sick, can't talking to her help her recover?" Gu Nianji didn't understand. She knew that psychiatrists had an important treatment method. It was to let patients talk as much as possible in a relaxed environment. Talking was a way to confide and to relieve stress. The problem is... Hua Xiaoheng looked at her. "She'll forget what she said today after she sleeps. She won't even recognize you. You'll have to reintroduce yourself and tell her what you said today. How many people do you think have the patience to repeat this process every day?" "Oh." Gu Nianji patted her chest. "So Auntie Song has short-term memory loss?" "No." Hua Xiaoheng looked up and sighed. 16 years ago, something happened in our family. My mother suddenly fainted. When she woke up, she only remembered what happened before she was 18 years old. She thought she had always been 18. Every day after that, she would forget what happened the day before. Gradually, no one in the Hua family spoke to her or paid attention to her anymore. They could only provide her with good food and drinks, and have a doctor come to check on her regularly. Other than that, she lived in the Hua family's mansion like she didn't exist. Gu Nianji gripped Hua Xiaoheng's arm sympathetically. "She doesn't remember you either, right?" "Yes." Hua Xiaoheng turned to look at her. "But it's okay. It doesn't affect me. Don't think too much about it." Gu Nianji was speechless. Fine, since the powerful Uncle Hua didn't need anyone's sympathy, Gu Nianji could only rub her nose. "I understand. But..." She thought about it and said, "You said Auntie Song will forget what happened the day before the next day, but I don't think that's necessarily true." Hua Xiaoheng didn't say anything, nor did he correct her. He only looked at her inquiringly. "She was the woman who barged into my bedroom last night." Gu Nianji's eyes locked with Hua Xiaoheng's. "You knew about it yesterday, didn't you?" That was why he didn't let anyone investigate further. Gu Nianji's bedroom was on the first floor, and the south wall was lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. For some reason, the windows weren't locked and could be opened from the outside. Song Jining had snuck in at some point and sat by Gu Nianji's bed to look at her. However, it had snowed almost all night last night, so Song Jining must have left footprints in the snow when she came in. Therefore, the street lights outside were appropriately broken, so no one would be able to see the footprints in the snow for the time being. By this morning, the snow had already erased Song Jining's footprints from last night, so the incident could be covered up. So Auntie Song wasn't the only one at fault when she came to my room yesterday. Someone did it on purpose. Gu Nianji concluded. I don't know why this person would do such a thing. Hua Xiaoheng was silent for a long time before replying, most of it is correct. But Gu Nianji wasn't done. When I came out for dinner this evening, I ran into Auntie Song in the hallway again. I think she remembers me. The look in her eyes and her interest in me shows that she doesn't know anything about what happened yesterday. Hua Xiaoheng's brows furrowed. Are you serious? Yes, I swear on my honor. Gu Nianji nodded solemnly. Uncle Hua, you know that my instincts are very accurate. Your instincts? Hua Xiaoheng gave her a sidelong glance. His gaze was almost condescending. Gu Nianji braced herself. Isn't that right? Aren't my instincts very accurate? Hua Xiaoheng pursed his lips and looked away. Go to sleep. Tomorrow. He paused. I'll take you to see my mother tomorrow. Gu Nianji's heart leaped with joy. She nodded profusely. Okay. I was planning on buying Auntie Song a Chanel set for New Year. Yes, use this card. Hua Xiaoheng took out a card he had prepared for a long time from his trouser pocket. Use this card to buy things for you from now on. I don't need it. Gu Nianji quickly declined. I have scholarships and subsidies. It's enough for me to get by. Hua Xiaoheng flicked the black card. He looked down at her. How many scholarships do you have? Tens of thousands a year. Gu Nianji murmured. There's also subsidies. It's about 2,000 a month. That's enough to eat in the cafeteria. I'll also work part-time. He Zhichu had once said that if she helped with cases, she would get a commission. The Chanel set you're wearing is worth more than tens of thousands. Hua Xiaoheng glanced at her. He took her hand and placed the black card in her soft, fair palm. Take it. Be good. This was the second update, and also the second update of 2 updates in one. It included the second update of Chiyue, the leader of the Alliance, Jiyu, or spiritual pet affinity. Today is Monday, my dear friends, let's vote for the Major General. Especially the recommendation votes. Thank you, dear friends. Oh, ___, oh. Chapter 200. The shiny black credit card lay in Gu Nianji's delicate palm. The contrast between black and white was striking. Gu Nianji felt like she was holding a hot potato. She really wanted to return the card, but when she looked up at Hua Xiaoheng's handsome face and saw the unquestionable, undeniable expression on his face, Gu Nianji felt her legs go weak. She stood in front of Hua Xiaoheng with her hands spread, her expression conflicted and happy. Her eyelashes fluttered like butterflies, fanning huge waves in his heart. Hua Xiaoheng turned his head away, his hands itching to smoke. He took out a pack of cigarettes from his trouser pocket, his slender fingers fiddling with the pack as he debated whether or not to smoke. Gu Nianji's gaze was involuntarily drawn to his hands. His flawless hands, every joint had the word perfect written all over them. She wanted nothing more than to touch them to erase all the regrets of her life. The undisguised obsession and greed in Gu Nianji's eyes suddenly delighted Hua Xiaoheng. He leaned forward slightly and lowered his head to bring the cigarette pack to Gu Nianji's eyes. What are you looking at? His voice rose slightly at the end, his deep, mellow male voice slid past Gu Nianji's ear. Her earlobes and neck blushed. Gu Nianji took a step back in panic, afraid that Hu Xiaoheng would see through her thoughts. She stumbled back and stammered. Uncle Hu wants to smoke. I'll light the fire for you. She looked up at Hu Xiaoheng with sparkling eyes, trying her best to hide her fluctuating emotions. Did he even need to light the fire? Hu Xiaoheng stared at her misty, wet eyes and slowly put the pack of cigarettes back into his trouser pocket. You were looking at the pack. Yes. Gu Nianji nodded quickly and found the worst excuse. It's late, I have to sleep. Uncle Hua. She looked up at Hu Xiaoheng. Where are you sleeping today? The guest bedroom. Hu Xiaoheng straightened up and turned to leave. Gu Nianji had no reason to keep him in the master bedroom this time. Sigh, but after changing into Hu Xiaoheng's t-shirt as pajamas, she was satisfied. She slept soundly under the soft, white goose down comforter. It was a dreamless night, and he woke up at 7 the next morning. After washing up, she opened the bedroom door to see that Hu Xiaoheng was already up. He was fully dressed and standing in front of the bookshelf in the study, flipping through a document. The door of the study was wide open, facing the door of the master bedroom. Today, Hu Xiaoheng was still wearing his regular clothes, dark gray, custom-made thin wool trousers. The seams of the trousers were as straight as a pole. He had a dark brown military leather belt around his waist and a navy blue, fine wool shirt tucked into the belt. His broad back was a breathtaking inverted V in Gu Nianji's eyes. Hu Xiaoheng leisurely turned around and saw her standing at the door to the master bedroom. He nodded and said, You're up. Let's go to the 3rd floor after breakfast. His mother, Song Jining, lived on the 3rd floor. Gu Nianji composed herself and gave Hu Xiaoheng a big smile. Let's go together. Hu Xiaoheng thought about it and put the document back. He walked out of the study, closed the door, and walked out with her. As soon as they stepped out, they saw Hu Jialan talking to the orderly standing guard at the door. Good morning, Auntie Lan. Gu Nianji greeted her obediently. Hu Jialan looked up to see Hu Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji walking out together. She immediately smiled. Miss Gu, you're up so early. Why don't you sleep a little longer? She then said to Hu Xiaoheng, Good morning, cousin brother. Morning. Hu Xiaoheng appeared to be in a good mood. Is breakfast ready? Yes, it's in the dining room. Hu Jialan said as she turned to walk with Hu Xiaoheng. Cousin brother, how many days are you staying at home this time? Grandfather and second uncle were just discussing that you haven't been back for a few years. Since you're coming home for New Year's this year, should we invite friends and family over to celebrate? Gu Nianji walked behind them, enjoying herself. She didn't look around too obviously, but when she passed by the junction in the corridor where she had seen Song Jining yesterday, she couldn't help glancing at the window at the end of the junction. There was no one standing there today. Look at your feet when you're walking. Why are you looking around? Although Hu Xiaoheng and Hu Jialan were walking in front, his eyes never left Gu Nianji. He turned around to urge her. Gu Nianji quickly caught up with him. She smiled. Uncle Hua, your house is too big. I'm afraid I'll get lost. That's why I'm memorizing the way. Hu Jialan smiled. You don't have to. If you're worried about getting lost, just get a servant to lead the way. That's so troublesome. Gu Nianji shook her head with a smile. I can do this kind of thing myself. It's no trouble at all. Hu Jialan chuckled. There's a lot of servants at home. It'd be a waste if you didn't ask them to do something. Gu Nianji chuckled. She didn't say anything else. The three of them sat down in the dining room. Breakfast was already laid out. Hua Xiaoheng had his usual high-calorie, high-fat, and high-protein meals. Gu Nianji had toast, fried eggs, and milk. She didn't like Western-style breakfasts. She didn't exercise as much as Hua Xiaoheng, so she ate reluctantly. She only had a piece of toast and milk. Hua Jialan saw this and pointed at her plate with a smile. You can't eat. Not to your liking. Oh, I just recovered. My appetite hasn't improved yet. Gu Nianji smiled at Hua Jialan. Hua Xiaoheng finished his portion and took the rest of Gu Nianji's breakfast to eat. Zhang Wenna and Zhang Wenjie stared at the table. Hua Jialan was also shocked. She looked at Hua Xiaoheng, who was calm and collected. She then looked at Gu Nianji, who looked as if it was only natural. Her brows furrowed. Breakfast was usually shared among the young people of their generation. Grandfather Hua, Hua Guanchen, Uncle Zhang, and Aunt Zhang didn't come down for breakfast. They ate in their rooms. Of course, Song Jining usually didn't eat in the dining room for 3 meals a day. Last night was an exception. After breakfast, Hua Xiaoheng took Gu Nianji to the 3rd floor to see Song Jining. Hua Jialan was about to follow, but Hua Guanchen called out to her. Jialan, what gifts did the Shues give last New Year? Do you have a list? Hua Jialan quickly replied. Second uncle, I do. I'll go get it for you right away. Hua Guanchen nodded. Hurry up, I still have something to do. Hua Jialan had no choice but to hurry to the studio on the 1st floor to look for the list of gifts from last New Year. Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji arrived at the 3rd floor. They followed the corridor and saw a cleverly hidden staircase in the innermost walk-in closet. Gu Nianji looked at the staircase and gasped in amazement. I didn't expect the 3rd floor to be so special. The 3rd floor wasn't actually 1 story. It was a duplex with 2 stories. However, from the outside, the building only had 3 stories. Gu Nianji followed Hua Xiaoheng up the stairs. This floor was also like a loft. It wasn't as tall as the floors below. Hua Xiaoheng's 1.88-meter frame was almost touching the ceiling as he walked in the middle. Such a stifling space would probably be even more stifling for the mentally ill Song Jining, Gu Nianji sighed inwardly. She followed Hua Xiaoheng to a ajar door. A woman was speaking inside. Mrs. Song, what are you doing in the kitchen so early in the morning? Tell me what you want to eat. I'll get the main kitchen downstairs to make it. Song Jining didn't speak, but the aroma of food wafted out. Gu Nianji's heart skipped a beat. She walked past Hua Xiaoheng and smiled brightly. Good morning, Mrs. Hua. She entered a small room that looked like a living room. There was a door on the east wall. A middle-aged woman dressed in a white shirt and black pants came out from the door. She froze when she saw Gu Nianji. Then she saw Hua Xiaoheng behind Gu Nianji. She quickly bowed. Hua Xiao, Miss Gu. Hua Xiaoheng didn't speak. He stood behind Gu Nianji in silence. Song Jining also came out from the door when she heard the noise. She froze when she saw Gu Nianji's smiling face. Who are you? Gu Nianji had learned to be familiar with people very well. She said calmly, I'm Gu Nianji. Mrs. Hua, you said you were going to cook for me yesterday. I remember it. Song Jining looked at her blankly and muttered to herself. Did I say that? But I can't remember. She tried hard to remember. Her expression was pained. She hugged her head and didn't know what to do. She looked up and saw Hua Xiaoheng. Instinctively afraid of him, she shrank back. Gu Nianji took her hand. Don't think about it if you can't remember. Just pretend I'm here to freeload off Mrs. Hua's food today. To be honest, I haven't had my fill yet. She had been full when she smelled the food earlier. But now she was hungry when she smelled the food. Gu Nianji couldn't help swallowing. Song Jining was infected by her relaxed attitude. She leaned over and asked, "Are you really hungry?" "Yes, very, very hungry." Gu Nianji took her hand and turned to the small door. "Is this your kitchen?" They were greeted by a very simple kitchen. There was only one stove on the stove, and a pot of white porridge was simmering on it. The smell of food was coming from the porridge. Gu Nianji looked down and couldn't help swallowing again. The porridge was cooked too well. The rice grains were almost all broken in the pot, but the grains were distinct and didn't mix. Song Jining was amused by her gluttonous expression. She scooped a bowl for her. "Eat if you're hungry. There's more in the pot." As she spoke, she looked at Hu Xiaoheng, who had followed her in silently. She asked him timidly, do you want some?" Hu Xiaoheng nodded. Song Jining quickly scooped another bowl for him. Gu Nianji and Hu Xiaoheng sat at the small kitchen table and ate the porridge facing each other. The porridge was cooked so well that the oil was even coming out. It was moist and glutinous, and the natural fragrance of the rice was melted into the porridge. There were no seasonings or additions. It was just the heat and rice alone. It was truly the best porridge. Gu Nianji's bowl wasn't enough, so she ate another bowl. Song Jining's small pot was almost empty. "Oh. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hua. I should have left some for you." Gu Nianji apologized shyly. These 2 bowls of porridge were the best food she had eaten in the past 2 days. They were also the food that made her feel truly full. Song Jining smiled happily and said, it's okay. As long as you like it. I have more food. This was specially prepared for you. I told you. You actually remember what you said yesterday." Gu Nianji hugged Song Jining's arm happily. "Then, how about this? I ate the food you cooked, so I'll cook for you too, okay?" Song Jining nodded repeatedly. "Sure. What can you cook?" Gu Nianji actually didn't know how to cook anything except instant noodles. Of course, Hu Xiaoheng wouldn't let her cook instant noodles for his mother at home. He glanced at her. "You, go out with her. I'll cook." This was the first 3,000-word update. Today's second update was also 2 updates in one, including the first update to reward Ren Xiaoyao 2722's Chiyue with spiritual pet fate. It was around 1 p.m. It was the last 2 days of the month. Everyone, please vote for the Major General. Chapter 201. Hu Xiaoheng was going to cook for her. Gu Nianji was excited. She had eaten Hu Xiaoheng's cooking when she was 12 years old. After that, she ate in the military cafeteria. Although it was specially provided for generals, it was always cooked in large pots. It wasn't as good as Hu Xiaoheng's cooking. "Mrs. Hua, let's go out quickly. It's too narrow in here for Uncle Hua to turn around." Gu Nianji happily coaxed Song Jining out. They went to the living room outside and continued to have a friendly conversation about clothes, shoes, bags and other topics of mutual interest. The more they talked, the more Gu Nianji was certain that Song Jining's memory had stopped at 18 years old. It had been almost 30 years since then. Some of the brands she was familiar with no longer existed. She knew nothing about the new brands that appeared later. What kind of illness was this? How could she remember things before she was 18, but forget things that happened after she turned 18? And every day after that, she would forget what happened the day before, except for things that happened before she turned 18. Gu Nianji planned to ask Chen Lai about Song Jining's condition when she had time. They talked outside for less than half an hour when a fragrant aroma wafted over from the small kitchen. Gu Nianji's taste glands secreted saliva. She was hungry. Why did it smell so good? It was the aroma of pure food. There were green beans, seafood, and probably eggs. Gu Nianji sniffed and couldn't help feeling her way to the kitchen door. Hu Xiaoheng was scooping fried rice with a spatula. He turned to see Gu Nianji poking her head in and raised an eyebrow. "You can still eat?" Gu Nianji nodded. "Yes, yes." Hu Xiaoheng calmly turned to get a small bowl and ladled her a small bowl of Sanxian fried rice. Song Jining followed him in and timidly stood behind Gu Nianji, not daring to walk forward. Hu Xiaoheng looked at her and didn't say anything. He just placed a white orchid porcelain plate on the table. There was a small pile of golden fried rice on the plate. The rice grains were plump and golden, and each grain was soaked in egg juice. The fresh green beans were sweet and refreshing. Although the prawns were defrosted, they were marinated with a little yellow wine, so they were very delicious and didn't smell fishy at all. Gu Nianji finished the small bowl of Sanxian fried rice in 2 mouthfuls. She wanted to lick the bowl again even after she was done. It was simply too delicious. The taste seemed to have some sort of magical power, instantly reviving Gu Nianji's dulled sense of taste due to the fever. Song Jining silently sat across from Gu Nianji and began eating fried rice with a spoon. As she ate, her brows furrowed. She looked up at Hu Xiaoheng with confusion, then at Gu Nianji. "What's wrong? Is it not delicious? If it doesn't taste good, I'll help you eat it." Gu Nianji had already reached out to help Song Jining clean up. Hu Xiaoheng took her hand and put it back. His gaze was a little stern. "You can't eat anymore." Gu Nianji pursed her lips and quietly got up to pour tea. Song Jining finally asked Hu Xiaoheng softly, "May I ask how you managed to make it taste like this?" "I learned it from someone." He looked at Song Jining with a complicated expression and turned to Gu Nianji. "Do you want to go for a walk?" "Yes, of course." Gu Nianji quickly placed the tea tray in front of Song Jining. "Mrs. Hua, after you finish the fried rice, have some pu or tea." She looked at Hu Xiaoheng with stars in her eyes. "You really want to take me out for a walk? Today is Boxing Day. Many famous stores in the imperial capital will have good things on sale." Hu Xiaoheng stepped aside. "Didn't you want to buy something?" Oh. Yes, yes." Gu Nianji winked at Song Jining. "Take your time. I'm going out to buy something." Song Jining nodded in confusion. She still looked at Hu Xiaoheng. "This taste is so familiar. I can make it too." "Really?" Hu Xiaoheng smiled. He took Gu Nianji's hand and left. Gu Nianji followed Hu Xiaoheng down from the 3rd floor. She asked him quietly, "Why did your mother say this taste is so familiar?" "Because this is the fried rice she used to make for me when I was young. I loved it when I was young." Hu Xiaoheng replied dryly. Gu Nianji was about to look sympathetic when Hu Xiaoheng suddenly raised his hands to cup her face and pinch it. "Don't overthink it. I'm not that sentimental." Hu Xiaoheng's hands were strong. Gu Nianji's pale face blushed. He couldn't help but laugh. He patted her face gently and turned to go downstairs. As soon as he turned a corner, he bumped into Hu Jialan, who was rushing up the stairs. "Oh. Why are you guys down here?" Hu Jialan looked up to greet them. "Did you see Mrs. Song?" Hu Xiaoheng nodded. "Thank you." Gu Nianji covered her red face. She secretly rolled her eyes at Hu Xiaoheng. She peeked out from behind him. "Auntie Lan, why are you calling Mrs. Hu Mrs. Song?" Although Song Jining's surname was Song, she was married into the Hu family. She should be called Mrs. Hua. Although women in the Hua Xia Empire didn't change their husband's surname after marriage, they usually used their husband's surname after marriage to distinguish themselves from single women. Gu Nianji had noticed yesterday that she was the only one who called Song Jining Mrs. Hua. Everyone else, including the Hua family servants, called Song Jining Mrs. Song. Hua Jialan's bright almond-shaped eyes blinked with interest. She looked at Hua Xiaoheng with a smile. "Cousin brother, you haven't told Miss Gu yet." Hua Xiaoheng put his hands in his trouser pockets. He turned to look at Gu Nianji. "I'm going out for a smoke." He looked like he didn't want to talk about it anymore. He quickly walked down the stairs. Gu Nianji's large, misty eyes looked at Hua Xiaoheng's back. She then looked at the smiling Hua Jialan. She asked suspiciously, "What happened that I don't know about?" "I'll let cousin brother tell you." Hua Jialan patted her shoulder. She looked up and smiled at Hua Xiaoheng's back. She walked elegantly upstairs. Gu Nianji turned to look at Hua Jialan's curvaceous back. She sighed enviously. She thought to herself that she had to work harder to get a waist like that, legs like that, and a butt like that. Hua Jialan always dressed neatly at home. Today, she wore a pink and purple qipao with snow-white fox fur trim. It accentuated her curvaceous figure. Gu Nianji could feel her waist twisting so much that it was almost a figure eight when she went upstairs. Of course, Hua Jialan didn't do it on purpose. It was just that with her curvaceous figure and narrow qipao, it was inevitable that she would sway gracefully when she went upstairs. Gu Nianji watched without blinking. She really wanted to learn how to be subtle. She was still young after all. Gu Nianji sighed faintly. As she went downstairs, she kept turning to peek at Hua Jialan's graceful movements. She only looked back when she was completely out of sight. She looked up to see Hua Xiaoheng with one hand in his trouser pocket and the other holding a cigarette. He was leaning against the banister at the bottom of the stairs waiting for her. "What are you looking at? Why are you so fascinated? Aren't you afraid of tripping on your way down?" Hua Xiaoheng extended his free hand to her. Gu Nianji took his hand and stared at the cigarette between his fingers. "Uncle Hua, are you going to smoke in the house? Go change first. Let me finish this cigarette." Hua Xiaoheng let go of her hand and walked to the door. Gu Nianji returned to the house to change. She wore a Burberry horn button coat and a mulberry backpack. As soon as she stepped out of the door, she saw Hua Xiaoheng come out from the guest bedroom. He wore a navy blue shirt over a dark brown leather jacket. It wasn't a jacket, but a casual suit jacket. It was slightly tucked in at the back and looked a bit like a hunting jacket, but without the fussiness of a hunting jacket. It was lighter than a coat and thicker than a wool suit jacket. Hua Xiaoheng looked even more handsome in it. He looked like he had just stepped out of a top fashion magazine. But none of the male models had Hua Xiaoheng's good looks. Gu Nianji was mesmerized. "Let's go. What are you spacing out for?" Hua Xiaoheng walked past her and took out his car keys from his leather jacket pocket. Gu Nianji ran out behind Hua Xiaoheng. The two of them were dressed casually. Hua Xiaoheng had only arranged for a few plainclothes guards to secretly follow and protect them. It wasn't as grand as the last time he picked Gu Nianji up. "Where to?" Gu Nianji followed Hua Xiaoheng's car. She asked carefully, "Uncle Hua, do you know how to drive?" Fan Jian had always been the driver. Fan Jian had been on vacation for the past few days, so Hua Xiaoheng hadn't hired another driver for him. Hua Xiaoheng didn't look at her. He started the car and said dryly, "No, what should I do? What should I do if I don't know how to drive?" Gu Nianji glared at him for a while. She looked at his handsome profile and suddenly giggled. She whispered, "Fine, fine, fine. You can say whatever you want if you're handsome. What are you talking about?" Hua Xiaoheng finally glared at her. "Sit tight and fasten your seatbelt." Gu Nianji fastened her seatbelt and complimented the Bentley from front to back, inside and out. Her words were exaggerated and talkative, so Hua Xiaoheng listened to her voice as he was lost in his thoughts. He didn't need to respond to Gu Nianji's words anyway, so the time he spent with her was always relaxing and passed quickly. It didn't take long before they arrived at Scion Plaza, the center of the famous stores in the imperial capital. They parked the car in the underground parking lot. Gu Nianji exited the car excitedly and stretched out her hand to spin in a circle. She said happily, "This parking lot is even bigger than the malls in the United States." Hu Xiaoheng locked the car and said expressionlessly, "Let's go to the 8th floor." The famous stores were all located on the 8th floor of the Scion Plaza. Gu Nianji jogged to catch up to him. She watched as the number of people in the parking lot increased. She pursed her lips and walked to Hu Xiaoheng's side. She said meekly, "Hua. Hu Xiao, I need to discuss something with you." "Go ahead." I won't call you uncle when we're outside today, okay?" Gu Nianji asked, blushing. She wanted to shop with Hu Xiaoheng like they were of the same generation and have a beautiful memory. But it wouldn't be a beautiful memory if she kept calling him Uncle Hua. Hu Xiaoheng was speechless. He tilted his head to look at her and said dryly, "The way you're bouncing around, people will think you're my junior even if you don't call me uncle." Gu Nianji quickly stopped in her tracks. "I'm not bouncing around. I wanted to talk to you." "Who told you to walk so fast?" So he thought she was too young and didn't have the demeanor of a mature woman. Gu Nianji's heart ached, but she forced it down and didn't show it. Hu Xiaoheng slowed down to match her pace. As if taking a leisurely stroll, he led her into the elevator and went straight to the 8th floor. The Chanel flagship store in the Hua Xia Empire was directly opposite the elevator on the 8th floor. "Go in and pick out some clothes." Hu Xiaoheng took out a cigarette. "I'll wait for you here." He stood in the hallway outside the Chanel store and lit his cigarette. He waved at Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji felt dizzy when she saw all the colors. Without another word, she went in to greet the newest Chanel collection. Hu Xiaoheng watched her bouncing back and smiled. He leaned against the railing on the 8th floor and smoked in silence. Half an hour later, Gu Nianji came out of the Chanel store with a smile on her face. She was about to show off her achievements to Hu Xiaoheng when she heard someone rush over in surprise. "Hu Xiao. Isn't that Hu Xiao? You're finally back. We haven't seen each other in years." This was the 3,500-word second update. It was the first update to reward Ren Xiaoyao 2722, the leader of the alliance, Chiue. It was the last 2 days of the month. My friends, please vote for the Major General with your monthly and recommendation votes. My friends, the more monthly votes you have, the more it will motivate me to update, ha 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 ha. Oh, ___, oh. Chapter 202. Hu Xiaoheng looked up to see that it was his childhood friend, Xue Jingjiang. He hadn't seen him since joining the army, and was surprised to see him here. Xue Jingjiang had large eyes and bushy eyebrows. He was tall and only a little shorter than Hu Xiaoheng. Beside him stood a tall woman with an internet celebrity face. He pounced on Hu Xiaoheng and patted his shoulder vigorously. He sighed and lamented, "Sigh, it's been so many years, why haven't you gone home? You're a soldier, not an exile." Hu Xiaoheng smiled and looked Xue Jingjiang up and down. "I haven't seen you in so many years, Boots. You're still as good as ever." Because Xue Jingjiang's surname was Xue, his childhood friends all called him Boots. "I haven't heard anyone call me Boots in so many years." Xue Jingjiang was almost moved to tears. "Hu Xiao, how long will you be back this time? I heard you become a major general at such a young age. That's amazing. You flatter me." Hu Xiaoheng shook hands with him. "What a coincidence that I ran into you as soon as I got back." Xue Jingjiang quickly said, "A chance encounter is better than an invitation. I'll treat you guys to a gathering at my Jiulo Fengyu. You must come, Hu Xiao." Hua Xiaoheng instinctively glanced at Gu Nianji, who was standing silently beside him. Gu Nianji immediately put on a pleading expression, hoping he wouldn't forget her earlier request. Xue Jingjiang finally noticed Gu Nianji, who was standing beside Hua Xiaoheng. At first glance, the little girl was like the first handful of snow in early winter, afraid to melt in one's hand, but afraid to be blown away by the wind. She had a face as exquisite as a painting, and a pair of inky black eyes that were so lively they seemed almost incorporeal. He froze, then chuckled and asked Hua Xiaoheng, "Who's this, Hua Xiao? Aren't you going to introduce her?" Hua Xiaoheng tilted his head to look at Gu Nianji and said casually, "Oh, she's the child of our family. Her surname is Gu, so you can call her Little Gu." As he spoke, he reached out with one hand to take the Chanel bags from her and held Gu Nianji's hand with the other. Gu Nianji was on the verge of breaking down when she saw Xue Jingjiang's, not calling him uncle, but calling him uncle, attitude. She was crying internally, but had to force a smile on her face. She waved at Xue Jingjiang. "Hello, Brother Boots." Xue Jingjiang was delighted to hear her soft voice. "Hello, little Gu. Go to Big Brother Xue's place later. Tell your Big Brother Xue what you want to play or eat. I'll definitely satisfy you." Xue Jingjiang turned to Hua Xiaoheng. "Zhulofenjiu is on the 9th floor here. You just need to go up one floor. I'll call Chui Baiwen, Hong Ziki, and Bai Tianchuan to invite them over for dinner." Hua Xiaoheng wasn't in a hurry to go home. He nodded and said, "We're all family, so we should get together." As soon as Hua Xiaoheng said this, Xue Jingjiang immediately understood. He quickly said to the popular girl beside him, "I have something to do here. You can go now. I'll have tea with you some other time." The girl had been looking at Hua Xiaoheng with sparkling eyes, but when Xue Jingjiang told her to leave, her face immediately darkened. She shouted angrily, "Xue! Don't burn the bridge after crossing it." Xue Jingjiang couldn't argue with her in front of Hua Xiaoheng, so he immediately glared at her. She didn't dare make a scene again. She pouted and threw her Louis Vuitton bag on her back before storming off. Xue Jingjiang finally dialed the numbers of his childhood friends and notified them one by one. "Hello. Brothers, come quickly. Hua Xiao's back. We'll meet at my Zhulofenjiu. Hurry over. Remember to bring family. It has to be a proper family." He turned his back to Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji when he said the last sentence. Gu Nianji immediately understood what Xue Jingjiang was implying. She couldn't help but smile. Hua Xiaoheng remained calm and collected, as if he hadn't heard Xue Jingjiang's words. He stood ramrod straight in front of the elevator door, his gaze lightly landing on Gu Nianji's curled red lips. He paused for a moment. The commotion had alerted many passers-by. Mei Xiaoan and Jiang Hongcha had just walked out of the Louis Vuitton store nearby, carrying a paper bag. They heard the commotion and looked up. Mei Xiaoan saw Gu Nianji immediately. She was standing next to an imposing man, like a helpless little bird. There was no trace of makeup on her snow-white face, but her features were extraordinarily beautiful. Jiang Hongcha saw Hua Xiaoheng first. His tall and straight figure and his breathtakingly handsome face made it hard for others not to notice him. Jiang Hongcha stared at Hua Xiaoheng for a moment before she saw Gu Nianji standing next to him from the corner of her eye. Her eyes were immediately drawn to Gu Nianji. Jiang Hongcha asked Mei Xiaoan, "Didn't you say that Gu Nianji was an orphan from an ordinary family?" "Yes, she's an orphan," Mei Xiaoan said absent-mindedly, his eyes fixed on Gu Nianji. "But the Burberry coat she's wearing, the Hermès scarf around her neck, the mulberry backpack on her back, and the Salvatore Ferragamo knee-high boots on her feet, she's wearing everything, at least $100,000, Jiang Hongcha said faintly. She pursed her lips and said, "Are you sure she's an orphan with no family background?" Mei Xiaoan frowned. Nianji has never dressed like this in school. If she had dressed like this before, there was no way he would be mistaken. He suddenly remembered Gu Nianji's apartment in C City's Fingya precinct, and felt that something was amiss. Jiang Hongqiao believed Mei Xiaoan and looked at Gu Nianji disdainfully. If you're not mistaken, then she must have a sugar daddy. Look, I've seen that woman who was arguing just now. She's an internet celebrity model who specializes in selling herself. She can go for more than 10,000 just to have a meal with someone. Mei Xiaoan was shocked. You're saying that Nianji earns money like this? She has good taste, though. The man holding her hand next to her is really imposing. This sugar daddy isn't just rich, he's also good-looking. He must be a high-quality sugar daddy. Did she hook up with him in America? Jiang Hongqiao gently pushed Mei Xiaoan's shoulder. Tell me, does Professor He know what his favorite student is up to? Jiang Hongqiao took out her phone and was about to take a photo of the two when a man walked over and said sternly, You can't take photos here. Please delete the photos you've already taken. Jiang Hongqiao was shocked. When the man walked away, she looked again and saw that the people at the elevator had already entered it. Let's go, let's go. Mei Xiaoan glanced at the elevator, then pulled Jiang Hongqiao away. Gu Nianji followed Hu Xiaoheng and Xue Jingjiang to the 9th floor of Sion Plaza. After a few steps, they arrived in front of an antique clubhouse. There was a black plaque on the door that was gilded with gold. On it were 4 large words written in flamboyant calligraphy, Jiu Lu Feng Yu. So that's what it was called. Gu Nianji looked at it curiously, then followed Hu Xiaoheng inside. Xue Jingjiang led the way. He was the owner, so of course the lights were green the entire way. They soon arrived at the most exclusive private room in the Jiu Lu Feng Yu clubhouse. There was an entire wall of glass windows overlooking the bustling streets. The private room was beautifully arranged with a luohan bed, a square table, a round rosewood table inlaid with mother-of-pearl inlaid, and a mahogany high-back armchair. There was also a separate karaoke room separated by a screen. Sit, I'll ask them to serve some local snacks first. Xue Jingjiang was personally taking care of everything. Hu Xiaoheng pulled out a high-back armchair for Gu Nianji and asked her to sit down. He sat on the chair next to her and crossed his legs. After pouring her a cup of tea, he draped an arm over the back of the chair behind Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji instantly sat up straight, not daring to lean back. It felt like she was sitting in his arms. His warm breath was so close, and his arm was right behind her. She really wanted to lean against him. This was the first 2,500-word update. Today's second update was also 2 updates in one, including the second update to reward Ren Xiaoyao 2722, Chiwe, the great leader of the alliance. It was at 7 o'clock p.m. It's the last day of the month. Everyone, please vote for the Major General. If you don't have any votes for this month, remember to vote for the Major General tomorrow for next month's guaranteed monthly votes. Chapter 203. Gu Nianji's heart raced and she was so nervous she was trembling, but she didn't dare lean back. What would Hu Xiao think of her if she did? Why aren't you eating? Your face is so red, are you having a fever again? Hu Xiaoheng observed Gu Nianji's expression as he spoke to Xue Jingjiang. Seeing her flushed cheeks, he quickly touched her forehead with his hand. It was indeed a little hot. Xue Jingjiang, who was sitting on the other side of Hu Xiaoheng, felt his heart skip a beat. He hoped Gu Nianji didn't get sick at this time. It wasn't easy for them to get together with Hu Xiao. If she got sick, Hu Xiao would definitely leave. Is it because the air conditioner here is too hot? I'll get someone to lower it. Xue Jingjiang stood up and asked Gu Nianji, do you want some warm milk? Milk was the standard for such a soft and adorable girl. Gu Nianji was mortified. She tilted her head slightly away from Hua Xiaoheng's hand and suppressed her racing heart. She smiled at Xue Jingjiang, who was looking at her eagerly. Brother Xue, I'm fine, but I can have some warm milk. Xue Jingjiang sighed in relief and gave her a thumbs up. I like this little sister. If you need anything in the imperial capital in the future, just come to me. Why would I want to come to you, you idiot? Every girl who comes to you ends up in bed with you. The door to the private room was pushed open, and the laughter of 3 men could be heard. 3 beautiful women followed behind them. Xue Jingjiang turned around to see his 3 childhood friends. He rushed over to greet them. There's a little girl here, so don't be dirty. Be careful, or Hua Xiao will shoot you. Hua Xiaoheng smiled and stood up from his seat. His military posture was ramrod straight as he looked at the 3 men. Hoodlum, Tianquan, Ziki, hello. Long time no see. Oh. It's Hua Xiao. Cui Baifei, Bai Tianquan, and Hong Ziki all rushed over to shake his hand. They laughed. Wow, this time I shook hands with the youngest major general in the Huaxia Empire. I'm not going to wash my hands for a month. Forget it. You only know how to joke around. Xue Jingjiang laughed heartily as he walked over. As he asked the waiter to serve the dishes, he began to introduce them. Hua Xiao, you haven't been back for so many years. You don't know about us, do you? Yes, tell me about it. Hua Xiaoheng turned to look at Gu Nianji. Seeing that she had also stood up, he pulled her to stand beside him. Xue Jingjiang pointed at a woman in a purple wool coat standing next to Cui Baifei. This is Baifei's wife. We call her Mrs. Cui. He pointed at the woman wearing a red down jacket standing behind by Tianquan and said, This is Tianquan's fiancée, Xue Xinran. She's also my cousin. We just got engaged this year and will officially get married next year. Finally, he pointed at the woman in the white cashmere coat standing beside Hong Ziki and said, She's Ziki's girlfriend, Guo Huining, a top student who graduated from the university's Faculty of Law. She's the director of Hong Corporation's legal department. She and Ziki are a match made in heaven, ha 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 ha. Hua Xiaoheng nodded at them. Nice to meet you. Who is this little sister? She looks so delicate and pretty. Hong Ziki's girlfriend, Guo Huining, was a talkative person. She was also a law student. Although her family background was average, she was smart, studious, and hardworking. Finally, she got the approval of the head of the Hong family and officially became the girlfriend of Hong Ziki, a famous rich second generation in the city. Xue Jingjiang looked at Gu Nianji with a smile. She thought that this girl had a good appearance and was dressed like a luxury brand, but it didn't stand out. She wasn't like some people who wore luxury brands because they wore clothes, not the other way around. Hua Xiaoheng took Gu Nianji's hand and smiled faintly as he introduced her to them. This is the child of the family. Her last name is Gu, you can call her Little Gu. He introduced her the same way he had introduced Xue Jingjiang. However, everyone in the private room was smart. Hearing Hua Xiaoheng's vague introduction, they could confirm at least 2 things. First, this girl had a close relationship with the Hua family. Even though her last name wasn't Hua, Hua Xiaoheng had referred to her as the child of the family. Second, Hua Xiaoheng valued this girl very much and was very protective of her. He didn't even say her full name and only said her last name was Gu. How protective was he of her? Although they all knew these 2 things, no one was stupid enough to argue with Hua Xiaoheng. Since he had casually introduced Gu Nianji's identity, they pretended not to know and sat down at the round rosewood tables decorated with mother-of-pearl shells. Everyone was supposed to be seated separately, but because Xue Jingjiang hadn't brought any female family members with him and Gu Nianji was an unknown girl, everyone intentionally switched seats. Hua Xiaoheng sat at the head of the table, with Gu Nianji on his right and Xue Jingjiang on his left. The seat next to Gu Nianji had been taken by Guohuaning. Two women sitting next to each other was definitely better than a stranger sitting next to Gu Nianji. Hua Xiaoheng watched as everyone sat down and didn't say anything else. He nodded in satisfaction and watched as the waiters served the dishes. Today is a welcome dinner for Hua Xiaoheng. Julafengia prepared Buddha jumps over the wall soup for Christmas and New Year. Most people have to pre-order it 6 months in advance, but since Hua Xiaoheng is back, I made an exception and enjoyed it myself. Xue Jingjiang smiled as he pointed to the ancient, steaming round pot in the middle of the table. The kitchen stewed it for an entire day and night. Everyone, try it. Buddha jumps over the wall soup requires more than 10 ingredients: sea cucumber, abalone, shark's fin, scallops, fish lips, turtle skirts, deer tendons, pigeon eggs, duck gizzards, fish maw, scallops, pigeon, spare ribs, razor clams, ham, pork belly, lamb knuckles, hoof tips, tendons, winter mushrooms, winter bamboo shoots, and so on. Then, the different ingredients are separately cooked using different methods such as frying, stir-frying, boiling, and deep frying. Finally, the cooked ingredients are layered into a large jar of Shaoxing wine. Then, soup and cooking wine are added. The jar is sealed with lotus leaves and placed over the fire to stew. Our restaurant uses white smoke and charcoal to simmer it for an entire day and night to create this delicious and nutritious Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Xue Jingjiang shook his head as he introduced the restaurant's signature dish to everyone. The waiters waited for Xue Jingjiang to finish before coming over to remove the lotus leaf lids. The rich aroma of food instantly filled the private room. Come, everyone, try it. Xue Jingjiang picked up a spoon and called for everyone to dig in. Although Gu Nianji had eaten her fill in the morning, she couldn't help but have a huge appetite. She looked at Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng didn't say anything and handed the small soup bowl in front of her to Xue Jingjiang. Xue Jingjiang quickly said, "The first bowl isn't very good, so I'll scoop some for myself first. The good stuff is at the bottom, and the so-called essence has already settled." Hong Ziki laughed when he heard this. "You idiot, Xue Jingjiang. Now that you're trying to please little Gu, you have to tell the truth. When I came here to eat Buddha jumps over the wall soup in the past, you always said that the first bowl was the most expensive. You coaxed me to eat the first bowl every time. So you've been lying to me all along." Xue Jingjiang laughed heartily. "Look at you. Who else would I lie to if not you? Let me tell you, you're only fit to eat the top layer." Bai Tianchuan couldn't help laughing as well. He shot Cui Baifei a look, and the two of them brought a bottle of 30-year-old Maotai over to toast Hua Xiaoheng. "Hua Xiao, we haven't seen you in so many years. We've missed you so much. We saved this Maotai just for you." When they'd first saved it, it had been 20-year-old. In the blink of an eye, it had become 30-year-old. Hua Xiaoheng smiled and raised his glass. "Then I'll drink first." He downed it in one gulp, and the mellow aroma of the Maotai mixed with the steam wafted around him. Gu Nianji was intoxicated just from the smell. She pursed her lips and secretly glanced at the bottle of Maotai. She had never tasted real alcohol in her life. Bai Tianchuan and Cui Baifei saw that Hua Xiaoheng had drunk first, and quickly followed suit. After a round of toasts, Xue Jingjiang also divided a jar of Buddha jumps over the wall soup into small bowls in front of everyone. Gu Nianji's bowl contained the essence of the entire jar. Hua Xiaoheng placed a soup spoon in front of her. "Eat, you've just recovered from a serious illness. You should nourish yourself." "Oh. Little Gu is sick. What illness?" Guohuaning overheard and quickly asked, "No wonder you look so pale. Are you weak?" She knew that these rich young ladies always ate supplements as if they were meals. Gu Nianji shook her head with a smile. "I caught a cold and had a fever. I recovered yesterday, but my appetite still isn't that good. But Brother Shue's Buddha jumps over the wall soup is on me today. My appetite depends on it. Gu Nianji's voice was soft and didn't have the inherent arrogance of a rich young lady. When she spoke, she was considerate and easily deflected Guo Huaning's sarcastic remarks. Chui Baifei, Bai Tianchuan, and Hong Ziki had a whole new level of respect for her with just this one sentence. Shui Jingjiang had long been stunned by Gu Nianji's beauty, and now he was impressed by her appropriate response. He quickly said, I see. Then I'll order another Buddha jumps over the wall soup. I must nourish little Gu's body today. Gu Nianji quickly waved her hands. No need, no need. This bowl is enough for me. Your brother Shui is looking out for you. Don't be disobedient. Hu Xiaoheng still had one arm draped over the back of her chair. Gu Nianji couldn't refuse anymore. She could only say to Shui Jingjiang, then everyone is in luck. Thank you, Brother Shui. Soon, another bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall soup was delivered. Gu Nianji continued to eat the bowl at the bottom. After finishing 2 small bowls of Buddha jumps over the wall soup, Gu Nianji couldn't eat anything else. Chui Baifei's wife, Mrs. Chui, saw this and left the table with a smile. I'm full. I want to sit over there. She then asked Gu Nianji, Little Gu, do you want to rest over there with me? Gu Nianji couldn't have asked for more. She quickly said, I'm full too. I'll broaden my horizons with Mrs. Chui. Bai Tianchuan's fiancé, Shui Xinran, and Hong Ziki's girlfriend, Guo Huaning, also left the table. The 4 women went to the karaoke area behind the screen to chat. Hu Xiaoheng listened to a few of them post stories about the past few years. Gu Nianji slumped on the sofa behind the screen and laughed. I'm really full. Brother Shue's Buddha jumps over the wall soup is so delicious. I can't stop eating it. You're lucky. It's all thanks to you. Mrs. Chui giggled and said, in the past, we had to draw lots to make reservations. That idiot Shui sure knows how to do business. He's a master at hunger marketing. There are more than 10 restaurants in the capital that serve a Buddha jumps over the wall, but his is the most popular. When they started talking about business, Gu Nianji didn't want to interrupt. She listened to them with a smile on her face and didn't interrupt. She was very quiet. Mrs. Chui didn't want to leave Gu Nianji out. Chui Baifei had brought her here to keep Gu Nianji company. She thought about it and asked quietly, Little Gu, how old are you this year? I just turned 18 in October. Gu Nianji picked up the teapot and poured tea for them. What about you guys? Since she was asking about age, everyone was equal and had to answer. Guo Huaning was the oldest. She was 28 years old, the same age as Hong Ziki. Mrs. Chui was 25, and Shui Xinran was 23, but they were both older than Gu Nianji. You're still so young. Where did you go to university? Guo Huaning was very emotional. I'm 10 years older than you. You already graduated with a master's in law. You're a genius. Don't be emotional in front of us. Shui Xinran nudged her and asked Gu Nianji, what's your major? They all thought Gu Nianji was only a freshman. Gu Nianji smiled. I graduated this year. I'll be going to be university's faculty of law in the spring. Sister Guo, please take care of me in the future. Oh. You graduated at 18. Mrs. Chui and Shui Xinran were pleasantly surprised. This was a beautiful girl with good looks, IQ, and a family background. They quickly sat on either side of Gu Nianji and pulled her aside to ask her all sorts of questions. They were very interested. Shui Xinran even asked her immediately, are you a relative of the Huo family? Do you have a boyfriend? My younger brother is 22 this year and just graduated from the university's Faculty of Economics. I'll introduce you guys someday. This was the second update of the day, and it was a total of 13,500 words. It included the second update to reward Ren Xiaoyao 2722, the leader of the alliance, Chiue. It was the last day of the month. Everyone, please vote for the Major General. If you don't have any more votes for this month, remember to vote for the Major General tomorrow for next month's guaranteed monthly votes. The original plan was to update at 7 p.m., but the editor informed the editor that they had to maintain the server. They were afraid that something would go wrong at night and it would be difficult to find the Major General, so they updated in the afternoon. There were no more updates at night. Chapter 204. Xue Xinran's voice was clear and melodious, and stood out in the midst of all the chatter. Gu Nianji felt that the entire room had gone silent after Xue Xinran's words. But perhaps it was just her imagination, because she quickly heard the clinking of glasses and the sound of Guo Huining fiddling with the karaoke machine. Mrs. Cui sat on the other side of her and nudged her with a smile. Yes, little Gu, do you have a boyfriend? If not, I have a lot of handsome young men here. She winked at her. It seemed like one of the hobbies of good women was to be matchmakers. Gu Nianji didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was a little flustered and stammered, boyfriend. Well. She recalled Hu Xiaohing's calm and rational voice when Mei Xiaoan had tried to pursue her at school. He had told her that he had no opinion on what kind of boyfriend she had. At the time, she didn't understand why her mood had immediately dropped when she heard his words. Now she understood, but she couldn't tell anyone about it. She now knew that she would never fall in love with another man, regardless of whether he had an opinion or not. Tell me. Why not? What's there to be shy about? Xue Xinran tugged at her arm and shook it. She laughed and said, didn't you already graduate from university? It wouldn't be strange if you had a boyfriend. Don't feel pressured, we won't force you. Gu Nianji finally took a deep breath and straightened her back. She slowly exhaled and blushed as she whispered, I don't have a boyfriend, that's great. Xue Xinran snapped her right hand. Where's your phone? I'll give you my brother's number, he's... Before Xue Xinran could finish, Gu Nianji interrupted her with a smile. But I already have someone I like. Although her voice was soft, it still penetrated the gap in the screen and reached Hu Xiaohing's ears. His hand paused for a moment before clinking glasses with Bai Tianchuan and Hong Ziki and downing the contents in one gulp. Good. Hu Xiao's tolerance is as good as ever. It's even better than before. Xue Jingjiang laughed heartily and filled his glass again. You already have someone you like. Mrs. Cui was curious. But you also said you don't have a boyfriend. Are you secretly in love with him? Crush. Are there still people who have a crush on someone these days? Guo Huining sat on the karaoke stage and turned around with a smile. If you like someone, go and confess. How could anyone refuse a girl like you? Gu Nianji smiled but didn't say anything. She regretted talking so deeply to these people she had just met. Whether she had a boyfriend or someone she liked, what did that have to do with them? She just couldn't restrain her desire to pour her heart out, so she took the opportunity to tell that person, but just as she expected, that person did not respond at all. Who she liked and who she didn't like was not within his consideration. Gu Nianji got up with a smile and asked Mrs. Cui, may I know where the bathroom is? I'll be right back. Mrs. Cui and Xue Xinran exchanged glances. They knew that they had said too much, and the little girl was unhappy. Come, I'll take you there. Just take a turn at the end of the corridor. Mrs. Cui stood up and held out her hand. Gu Nianji quickly said, Little Cui, it's okay. You guys sing, I'll go find it myself. The place wasn't big, so how could he not find it? I'm not a child. She turned and walked away. Mrs. Chui saw that Gu Nianji didn't want anyone to follow her. She remembered that it was broad daylight, and they were on Xue Jingjiang's turf. There was no way he would let anything happen to Hu Xiaoheng's relative, so she didn't follow Gu Nianji out. Instead, she followed Xue Xinran and Guo Huining to find a place to sing. Hu Xiaoheng stood up and said to the four of them, "You guys keep drinking, I'm going out for a smoke." He walked out as well. Xue Jingjiang and the others were all drunk, and none of them were a match for Hu Xiaoheng. When they saw him walk out, they could only wave at him. Everything they saw was double vision, but they couldn't put down their glasses when they got too drunk. Gu Nianji walked out alone and found the ladies' bathroom. She went in first, but didn't use the toilet. She tidied her hair and clothes in front of the mirror before coming out to the balcony to take a breath of fresh air. It was too hot in the private room, and she was wearing a high-collared cashmere sweater. She felt like she was about to break out in sweat. She walked to the balcony and saw that it was actually a glass balcony. In the winter, the glass ceiling would be lowered to create a thermostatic glass greenhouse. There were tall evergreen plants inside, and the sound of running water could be heard. The winter sun shone through the glass greenhouse's ceiling. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. Gu Nianji looked around and sat down on a stone bench under a banana tree. She took out her phone and unlocked it, wanting to call someone. She had been aroused by those people today, and her heart was pounding. She really wanted to ask someone if it was okay for her to have such thoughts. Gu Nianji opened the contact list on her phone. Her fingers slid over the long list of names, and she clicked on Little Temptress's profile picture. It was just noon, and Little Temptress was either having lunch or sleeping. She picked up the phone as soon as it rang. Little Temptress was about to take an afternoon nap. "Nianji, is that you? Where are you now?" Little Temptress asked anxiously, "Are you okay?" They hadn't been in contact since Christmas night, when they received her Christmas greetings. Little Temptress, Lady Chow, and Green Tea Fong were all worried about her. Gu Nianji smiled, "I'm fine, I'm eating out with friends." "Oh, that's good." Little Temptress sighed in relief, "Don't run away without a word again. You really scared the three of us that day." "I won't." Gu Nianji felt that her ability to withstand shocks had increased. She switched the phone to her other hand and asked quietly, "Little Temptress, is it convenient for you to talk now?" Little Temptress nodded, "I'm alone in my bedroom, just about to take an afternoon nap." "Of course, I won't sleep if you want to talk on the phone. I've been sleeping at home all day during the holidays, I've gotten fat." Gu Nianji imagined Little Temptress's arrogant expression and couldn't help laughing. "Little Temptress, I want to talk to you, I'm very upset, is it because of Mei Xiaoan?" Little Temptress perked up and sat up, leaning against the pillow. "Tell me, how do you want me to avenge you?" Gu Nianji quickly shook her head, No, what does it have to do with him?" "Little Temptress, to tell you the truth, I've never liked him from beginning to end." Because she already knew what it was like to like someone. "If you've never liked him, then what are you upset about?" Little Temptress didn't understand. She took the iPad and swiped it open, planning to watch the drama while talking to Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji stammered a few times before whispering, "Because I like someone." "Oh? Really? Who is it? Who is it? Tell me." Little Temptress was very interested and flipped the iPad on the bed. "Let me see if he's good enough for you." Gu Nianji said, "You don't know him." "Won't I know him if you tell me?" Little Temptress snorted, "Hurry up and tell me. I'm warning you, you can't whet someone's appetite without saying anything, that's just being a hooligan." Gu Nianji was silent for a moment, then said, "I like someone, but he won't like me." Their status was an insurmountable chasm between them. Little Temptress was silent for a moment, then looked at the phone and put it to her ear. "Is this classmate Gu Nianji?" "No way. Who would reject a girl like you? He must be blind. Keep your voice down." Gu Nianji felt like little temptress's voice could be heard without a loudspeaker, so she quickly covered the phone. Don't be so loud. Fine, fine, I'll keep my voice down. Little temptress paused. How do you know he won't like you? Have you confessed to him? Of course not. Gu Nianji's face was as red as blood. How would she dare? I see, I didn't think our Nianji would have a crush. Little temptress teased her with a smile, finally saying, but I think you should let him know you like him. No. Gu Nianji instinctively objected. I'm afraid if I tell him, we won't even be friends anymore. If she was rejected, she wouldn't have the face to stay by his side anymore. How about this, you flirt with him. Little temptress waved her arm. Big sis will teach you a few tricks to flirt, it'll be a piece of cake for you. This was the first 2,500-word update. Today's second update was also 2 updates in one, including an additional update to reward Ren Xiaoyao 2722, Chiyue's Immortal Love Fate. It was at 7 p.m. Thank you to Guanghan Palace Lord A for the Spirit Pet Fate yesterday, and thank you to Fish G for the Immortal Love Fate yesterday. Mwah. On the first day of September, give your monthly and recommendation votes to the Major General. Chapter 205. Seduce. I can't. I don't know how to. I don't want to be too proactive. Gu Nianji said sheepishly. Her hand unconsciously grabbed the large leaf of the banana tree beside her. She was no stranger to the word seduce. She had seen many things in her 2 years in the dorm. The reason why Little Temptress was called Little Temptress was because she was a famous seducer in the C University Faculty of Law. The men she wanted to seduce had never escaped her grasp. Nianji, you're wrong about that. Seducing isn't proactive, and it's not throwing yourself at him. When Little Temptress mentioned her specialty, she immediately became excited. The purpose of flirting is to attract the other party's attention. Make him fall in love with you and then chase after you. Therefore, your posture must be nice and reserved. You can't be impatient. This way, you can advance and retreat at will. You won't be unable to be friends with the other person because of rejection. Oh. You can do that. Gu Nianji felt like she had opened the door to a new world. Her heart tensed as she plucked a strand of the banana tree's large leaf. Of course. How do you think I managed to get the title of Little Temptress from both sides? Little Temptress laughed wildly. If her subordinates had seen it, they would have thought they were blind. How could such a seductive Little Temptress laugh so boldly? Then how did you seduce him? Gu Nianji's interest was piqued. She took out the enthusiasm of a studious child and swore to study this seduction skill. Little Temptress leaned on her bed and laughed hysterically. Well, half of it depends on comprehension and half on talent. The master leads the way, but the individual cultivates it. But Nianji, you've always learned things quickly. I have high hopes for you. Tell me. Gu Nianji panicked. Don't talk nonsense. On the walkway outside the glass greenhouse, Hu Xiaoheng lit a cigarette and smoked quietly. Although Gu Nianji's phone call wasn't loud, it was quiet and no one was there. Hu Xiaoheng leaned against the smooth wall of the greenhouse and heard most of it. There was no expression on his face. The white smoke he exhaled from time to time obscured his features. Only a pair of dark, jade-like eyes flashed with an obscure light. Little Temptress continued on the phone. Flirting isn't easy, but it isn't hard either. The key is the degree of control, and how much do you know about the person you like? That was hard to say. Gu Nianji frowned and thought about it, then asked, what do you mean? She knew what color Hu Xiaoheng liked, what he liked to eat, what he liked to do, when he was angry, and when he was happy. She didn't know much else. As expected, the enchantress touched his sore spot. You don't even know that. For example, what kind of woman does he like? Ha! Gu Nianji felt like she was about to be slaughtered. What kind of girl did Hu Xiaoheng like? This question was not easy to answer. She had only seen it once, at the closing reception of the International Outstanding Women's Commendation Conference. Hu Xiaoheng had smiled at a beautiful woman. Did that count? Gu Nianji mulled it over for a long time, then shook her head. Not really. Little temptress, she thought about it and asked from another angle, what kind of female stars does he like? Fat or thin? Was it tall or short? Is she plump or slim? Gu Nianji. She was about to be slaughtered. The stern Major General Hu Xiaoheng was interested in female stars? That was too scary. She might as well think about how to earn 100 million to calm her nerves. Nianji. You don't even know what kind of person the man you like is, yet you like him. Little temptress was about to spit blood from anger. You might as well change your crush to someone else. No. Gu Nianji objected reflexively. I just like him. I can't like anyone else more than I like him. Even if she didn't marry for the rest of her life, she would stay by his side. Fine. Little temptress closed her eyes. She hated this kind of unreasonable little girl who was blinded by one-sided love. But she wasn't someone else. She was Gu Nianji, her dear roommate and friend. She couldn't watch her friend waste her youth in a hopeless relationship. Although youth would pass even if it wasn't wasted, it was better to do something in one's youth than nothing. Little temptress perked up and regrouped. Fine, let's not care what kind of woman that man likes. It doesn't matter if he likes you or not. You have to like him, and he has to like you, right? Yes, yes, yes. Little temptress's words resonated with Gu Nianji's heart. She nodded like a chick pecking at rice, a strand of hair swaying beside her ear as she nodded. So why should she care what kind of woman Hu Xiaoheng liked? She liked him, so she wanted the woman he liked to be like her. If not, then she had to seduce him until she was. Gu Nianji clenched her fists. She could almost feel her little universe burning up. Now that the direction of action was determined, the specific plan of action was in order. Little temptress began to instruct her, seducing him is actually very simple. It's all about adapting to the local conditions and seducing everywhere. For example, when you're talking to him, don't look at him directly. Instead, stand in front of him and look at him from a 45-degree angle. When he walks past you, look at him from the corner of your eye. When he notices you, quickly look away. You have to make the best of a mistake. It's winter now, so you can also let him warm your hands after you shower at night. Gu Nianji thought about it carefully. She felt very hopelessly that if she continued seducing him like this, she would die from a blood rush to her brain before Hu Xiaoheng could react. Also, if she treated Hu Xiaoheng like this, he would definitely think she was crazy. He might even take her to Chinlai for a CT scan ==. Also, if she treated Hu Xiaoheng like this, he would definitely think she was crazy. He might even take her to Chinlai for a CT scan ==. Is there any other way? Gu Nianji asked weakly. She almost raised her hand. I don't think these methods are suitable for him. Hey! How do you know it's not suitable if you haven't tried it? Little temptress was furious. How dare he question her professional seduction skills? This was intolerable. Let me tell you, when it comes to seducing a man, you have to be familiar with him. You can't be too unconventional. Because you want to leave a good impression on the man you like, not confuse him. Little temptress was exasperated at her failure to meet her expectations. This little girl was usually so smart in her studies. Why was she so clueless when it came to relationships? Perhaps it was because she was too young. Gu Nianji listened to Little Temptress's outburst in silence. She even raised her phone away from her ear because she was too loud. However, Hu Xiaoheng, who was standing at the door, heard everything clearly. His face was still expressionless as he calmly puffed on his cigarette. "Little temptress, do you have any other methods?" That person is very difficult." Gu Nianji heard that little temptress had finally finished venting and asked quietly. She put the phone to her ear again to listen carefully. Hu Xiaoheng finally threw the cigarette butt into a nearby trash can and turned to walk inside. He quietly stood in front of Gu Nianji. "Nianji." Gu Nianji was startled. Her hand slipped, and the phone slipped from her hand to the ground. Hu Xiaoheng bent over and caught the phone. He turned it off and handed it to Gu Nianji. "What are you doing here?" Gu Nianji blushed. She could only pray that Hu Xiaoheng hadn't heard what she had said to little temptress. She mumbled, I was calling a classmate." "Okay, go back. You've been out for a long time." Hu Xiaoheng didn't say anything else. He spread his long, clean fingers at her. Gu Nianji carefully placed her small hand in Hu Xiaoheng's palm. He held her hand as they returned to the private room. The door to the private room opened. Hu Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji walked in together. "Oh. You guys came back together." Xue Jingjiang was drunk and stumbled over to Hu Xiaoheng. "Hu Xiao, Tianchuan was crying just now." You, hurry up and talk to him, what's there to cry about?" Hu Xiaoheng sat down. He didn't let go, so Gu Nianji had no choice but to sit where she had been, right next to Hu Xiaoheng. She didn't want to socialize with the three women she wasn't familiar with anyway. She preferred to sit next to Hu Xiaoheng. There are a lot of things he needs to cry about. Cui Baiwen hiccuped. His face was red. His second uncle committed such a huge crime and even lost his life. His family looks fine, but actually, it's nothing. Bai Yuxing is Bai Yuxing, and the Bai family is the Bai family. I'll take responsibility for what I did. It's not like we're in the business these days. Hu Xiaoheng said nonchalantly as he poured himself another glass. His calm demeanor made it impossible for anyone to guess that Bai Yuxing, who had caused Bai Tianchuan to cry and the entire Bai family to hate and miss him, had died at his hands. Don't say such depressing things. Come on, drink up. Hong Ziki came over noisily to pour them wine. Gu Nianji stared at the moutai in front of her. She sniffed, her large eyes full of desire. There were some things she didn't dare do when she was sober. There were some things she didn't dare say when she was sober. If she was drunk, would she dare to do those things and say those things? Gu Nianji mustered up her courage and wanted to ask for wine. She didn't expect Hu Xiaoheng to speak first. You want a drink? Gu Nianji's neck stiffened, but she nodded stiffly. Hu Xiaoheng thought about it. He took an unopened pair of chopsticks and dipped them in his glass. He picked them up and brought them to Gu Nianji's lips. He said dryly, "Open your mouth." Gu Nianji felt her neck stiffen even more. She opened her lips mechanically and stuck out her tongue to lick the chopsticks Hu Xiaoheng handed her. Hu Xiaoheng swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down, but his expression was calm and gentle. "Can you drink it?" he asked Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji nodded mechanically. She was crying inside. Asking someone to lick the wine on the chopsticks was like asking a 4 or 5-year-old child. Was she no different from a 4 or 5-year-old child in Hu Xiaoheng's heart? Gu Nianji felt a surge of courage. No, she couldn't let Hu Xiaoheng think she was still a child. Yes, she was already 18 years old. She was an adult. She was old, really old. She steeled herself and walked past Hu Xiaoheng to pick up the bottle. She poured herself a small glass and smiled at Hu Xiaoheng. "Hu Xiaoheng, let me toast you. You've worked hard all these years. Take a good rest today. Hu Xiaoheng's right hand rested on the back of her chair. He turned sideways to look at her. His deep eyes were as calm as an unfathomable lake. He slowly raised his glass with his left hand and clinked it with Gunyanji's. Hu Xiaoheng drained his glass in one gulp. Gunyanji saw this and also raised her glass to drink it. The 4 drunk men nearby saw this and clapped their hands. Amazing! Amazing! As expected of the Hu family. Good alcohol tolerance means good character. Little Gu, you're my friend for sure. Shui Jingjiang was the loudest. He even brought his own glass over to have a drink with Gunyanji. Gunyanji had just downed a glass of Mao Tai. She didn't feel anything at first. The wine was mellow and sweet, and the aftertaste lingered. Her internal organs felt warm and good. But after a while, her head began to spin. She felt like she was floating, and her weight seemed to have lightened. She wanted to fly. Seeing Shui Jingjiang come over to toast her, Gunyanji remembered to look at Hu Xiaoheng to see if he agreed. Hu Xiaoheng calmly poured her another glass. Drink some more. It's rare for your brother Shui to be so happy today. This was the second update of the day, and also a total of 13,500 words. It included the additional update for Ren Xiaoyao 2722, The Great July Immortal Fate. On the first day of September, give your monthly votes and recommendation votes to the Major General. Chapter 206. This time, Hu Xiaoheng only filled Gunyanji's glass halfway. Shui Jingjiang was drunk and didn't mind. Gunyanji was a young girl, so it was good enough for her to drink with him. Seeing that Hu Xiaoheng didn't object, Gunyanji took the glass and clinked it lightly with Shui Jingjiang's before downing it. Cui Baifei saw this and also came over with his glass. Hey, little Gu's really good at hiding her true colors. Her face hasn't changed even after 2 glasses. This little sister is good. I've noticed that she doesn't drink to her head, but she can really hold her liquor. Hong Ziki burped and felt a little uncomfortable. He stood up and said, "You guys keep drinking, I'm going out for a walk." Although Hong Ziki's girlfriend, Guo Huining, was singing karaoke with Mrs. Cui and Xue Xinran on the other side of the room, her attention was on the table. Seeing that Hong Ziki was drunk and about to go out, she went to take care of him. Cui Baifei poured Gunyanji a glass from the bottle and said to Hu Xiaoheng, who was smiling faintly, "Hu Xiao, this time it's me and little Gu drinking, don't mind me. I'll finish it all, little Gu, you can drink as much as you want." As he spoke, he tilted his head back and downed his glass. Gunyanji didn't wait for Hu Xiaoheng to speak and had already stood up with her glass. She raised it at Cui Baifei. "Thank you, Brother Cui, I'll definitely drink with you." She finished her glass as she spoke. She drank in a hurry and coughed twice after drinking. Her face gradually turned red, like the white snow in early winter dyed with rouge. She was drunk and her cheeks were red. Amorous feelings arose in her eyes, and as she looked around, they formed threads of lingering love in people's hearts. Hu Xiaoheng froze and pulled her to sit on the sofa behind the table. He gently patted her back to calm her down. Cui Baifei and Shui Jingjiang, who were used to seeing all kinds of beautiful women, were stunned. They only came back to their senses when Hu Xiaoheng's sharp gaze landed on them. They giggled and returned to their seats to play rock paper scissors. 5, 6, 4, 4. No, 8. 8. Bai Tianchuan had just cried and drank a lot of wine. He also felt uncomfortable, but he couldn't stand up. He looked around the private room for a long time before he found Xue Xinran, who was sitting behind the screen and singing. He shouted, "Xinran! Xinran!" Xue Xinran turned to look at him. She knew that he had drunk too much and wanted to go out for a while. She said to Mrs. Chui, "I'll be right back." Mrs. Chui also wanted to go out for a walk. She stood up and said, "You go take care of Bai Tianchuan. I need to go out for a while." She and Xue Xinran walked around the screen to the table. Seeing Xue Jingjiang and Cui Baifei happily playing rock-paper-scissors, she didn't disturb them. Xue Xinran helped Bai Tianchuan out of the room, and Mrs. Cui followed behind them. At the corner, they parted ways. Xue Xinran and Bai Tianchuan went to the unisex family bathroom, while Mrs. Cui went to the ladies' bathroom. After they left, the private room seemed empty. There was only the sound of the karaoke machine behind the screen and the two men arguing at the opposite table. Gu Nianji felt the effects of the alcohol kick in. Her eyes were a little dazed, and her mind alternated between sober and confused. She gradually grew bolder. Hua Xiaoheng helped her breathe for a while. Seeing that she had stopped coughing, he finally let go. However, he didn't take his arm back. Instead, he rested it on the back of the sofa behind her. His tall body leaned slightly towards her. He crossed his legs and looked straight ahead. The expression on his face was very calm, but his aura enveloped Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji sat motionless and only glanced sideways. Seeing that Hua Xiaoheng wasn't looking in her direction, the alcohol emboldened her. Slowly and discreetly, she inched back towards the back of the sofa, step by step. However, although she was drunk, she still had a trace of rationality left in her. She didn't dare to be too presumptuous. Instead, she just wanted to get a little closer and pretend that she was in his arms. Hua Xiaoheng's body reeked of alcohol and a little smoke. However, it wasn't unpleasant at all. Instead, it made him look manly. Gu Nianji closed her eyes and savored the intoxicating scent of Hua Xiaoheng's body. She quietly took another step back. At that moment, Hua Xiaoheng leaned in front of her and grabbed an ashtray from the small coffee table on the other side of the sofa. The sofa suddenly sank. Gu Nianji, who had been sneakily leaning back, was caught off guard. In an instant, she completely rolled into Hua Xiaoheng's arms. Her eyes widened and she didn't know where to put her hands and feet. Hua Xiaoheng looked down at her. His deep eyes were as dark as ink. She couldn't see the slightest emotion. "What are you doing? Can't sit still?" Hua Xiaoheng asked calmly. He still maintained his posture, but his arms were still far away. It seemed like he didn't want to touch Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji closed her eyes and leaned her head back to lean against Hua Xiaoheng's arm that was behind her. She made a spineless excuse. "I'm dizzy." She wanted to lean against him. "Dizzy? Did you drink too much?" Hua Xiaoheng casually moved the arm he had placed on the sofa behind Gu Nianji to encircle her in his arms. He put down the ashtray with his other hand and touched her forehead. If Gu Nianji still didn't know how to deal with this, then she would have wasted all this time following Hua Xiaoheng. The effects of the alcohol were at its peak. Her spirit was boiling, and her courage grew. She reached out and held the large hand that Hua Xiaoheng had just used to test the temperature of her forehead. She said coquettishly, "It hurts. Rub it." Hua Xiaoheng's Adam's apple bobbed up and down with difficulty, but his face was as calm as ever. His hand paused, but in the end, Gu Nianji pulled his hand to her temple and gently massaged it. It had to be said that this was very effective in quenching the effects of the alcohol. Gu Nianji nestled in Hua Xiaoheng's broad arms. She was so comfortable that she almost meowed like a kitten. The two men who were playing rock-paper-scissors looked over to see Hua Xiaoheng massaging Gu Nianji's temples. Gu Nianji's snow-white face was abnormally flushed. Little Gu. What's wrong?" Xue Jingjiang stood up. He was too drunk to speak properly. "Drunk? Yes, it's my first time drinking alcohol, and it's Mao Tai, the best of all Baijiu. How can I not be drunk? Hua Xiaoheng said nonchalantly. It's fine. She'll be fine after resting for a while. Hua Xiao, help her to the private room to rest for a while. There's everything there, and it's changed every day. It's clean, and there's nothing messy. Shui Jingjiang hiccuped again, but still cared for Gu Nianji. He pointed crookedly at a small door on the south side of the private room. I only give this private room to my closest relatives and friends. Don't worry. Hua Xiaoheng smiled. Thank you. I'll take her in to rest for a while. Let's continue drinking when she comes out. Okay. We're not going home until we're drunk. I won't let you out until it's dark. Shui Jingjiang and Cui Baifei had finally had the chance to reunite with Hua Xiaoheng after more than a decade. They couldn't wait to make up for the past decade of regret in one go. Shui Jingjiang yelled for the kitchen to prepare dinner. Cui Baifei went to find his wife, Mrs. Cui. The private room was soon empty. Hua Xiaoheng half supported and half carried Gu Nianji into the small room inside and gently closed the door. The light in the private room was very gentle. There was a peony brocade screen in the middle of the room. Through the translucent screen, one could see an antique lacquer bed behind it. Hua Xiaoheng smiled. He helped Gu Nianji around the screen and placed her on the lacquer bed. He was about to leave when Gu Nianji suddenly stretched out her arms and hugged his neck. She opened her large, misty eyes and looked at him silently. This is the 2,300-word first chapter. Should I write it at the third chapter today? I'm thinking, my dear friends, please vote for me. Let me see if I can inspire you to write the third chapter. Maybe I can write the first chapter at 1 in the afternoon. Then I can write the third chapter at 7 in the evening. How about that? Chapter 207. Gu Nianji had a pair of very mesmerizing eyes. Her pupils were especially dark, almost like they had a natural contact lens effect. When she looked at you attentively, her clear eyes were like an innocent fawn, with the innocence of a child and the cunning of a young girl. Hua Xiaoheng was about to get up when Gu Nianji wrapped her arms around his neck. This position forced him to hover above her body, trying his best to maintain his balance. But he didn't say anything and just looked at her quietly. Gu Nianji's consciousness alternated between clear and muddled, but she still firmly remembered what she had to do. Hua Xiao. She finally spoke. Her soft voice had a hint of alcohol in it, and her voice was intoxicating. Yes. He placed both hands on the pillow beside her head and looked at her intently with his dark, jade-like eyes. She could even see her own reflection in his eyes. Hua Xiao. Gu Nianji called his name again, her eyes glazed over. You. I want to ask you a question. Speak. Gu Nianji felt her mouth go dry. She couldn't help licking her lips and mumbling, "Do you have a girlfriend?" She finally asked the question that concerned her the most. Gu Nianji felt that this was the most important question compared to all the flirting little temptress had said. She had to find out if Hua Xiao had a girlfriend before she could decide what to do. Hua Xiaoheng was slightly taken aback. Girlfriend? His brows quickly furrowed. Why do you ask? Hadn't he already told Big Xiong to tell Nianji that he didn't have a girlfriend? Didn't Big Xiong say anything? He actually dared to disobey a military order. A certain someone was probably itching for a beating. Yin Shixiang, who was strolling around in the 6th Military Region's headquarters, suddenly sneezed. Gu Nianji didn't know what Hua Xiaoheng was thinking. She clutched Hua Xiaoheng's neck tightly, afraid that he would turn around and leave. I just want to know. What do you want me to do now that you know? Hua Xiaoheng's eyes grew darker, and there was a hidden meaning in them that Gu Nianji couldn't understand. She pulled out a hand and gently stroked Hu Xiaoheng's eyes. Her face was full of glee as she said, "Then tell me first. Do you have it or not? So what? So what if I don't? So annoying. If I tell you to say it, just say it. No multiple choice questions." Gu Nianji pouted and pouted coquettishly. She was much bolder than usual. Hu Xiaoheng couldn't help but laugh. Alcohol really made people brave. If Nianji was sober, she wouldn't even talk back to him, let alone touch his face. She had always been exceptionally obedient in front of him. Yes, no. He grabbed Gu Nianji's hand, which was caressing his face, and pressed it against the pillow. Gu Nianji giggled, her eyes sparkling like the stars in the sky were reflected in her eyes. No. That's great. What's so good about it? Hu Xiaoheng pressed down and gradually got closer to Gu Nianji, who was lying on the bed. Gu Nianji focused her attention on Hu Xiaoheng's handsome face. She sighed contentedly. Of course it's good if you don't. Then let me ask you again, have you ever liked anyone? Say it. Do you have someone you like? Gu Nianji hugged Hu Xiaoheng's neck and shook it. Hu Xiaoheng rarely saw Gu Nianji act like this, especially after she turned 15. He couldn't help but love her so much that he couldn't bear to let her go. He lowered his body and turned around with Gu Nianji in his arms. He leaned against the exquisite lacquered bed and let Gu Nianji lie on top of him. His usually stern face had a slight smile, and his low, magnetic voice could almost suck a person's heart out. Say someone you like. Okay, you go first. Gu Nianji. She couldn't wrap her head around it. I go first. Say what? Someone you like. Aren't you going to say someone you like? Hu Xiaoheng looked at Gu Nianji with a smile. Gu Nianji propped her elbows on top of him and looked up. Her curved willowy brows furrowed. Are you going to say someone I like? No way. I'm not asking about someone you like. She tapped Hu Xiaoheng's heart with her finger. Don't interrupt. Say it, say someone you like. You go first. But you don't care who I like. Why should I say it first? He had to say that even when Gu Nianji was drunk, she kept her secret firmly and refused to say it. If I care, you'll say it. Yeah. Gu Nianji nodded seriously. Of course. Okay, then I care. Hu Xiaoheng's reply was even more perfunctory. What do you mean I care? Gu Nianji muttered a few times to express her displeasure. Then she started counting on her fingers to name the person she liked. He must be handsome, tall, good-looking, powerful, good at everything, and good to me. Hu Xiaoheng suddenly felt like King Hell. That was the person she liked. According to this standard, there were at least 10,000 people in the entire imperial capital. Even a little girl could fool people when she was drunk. Had he, Big Xiong, and little Zay taught her to resist seduction too well in the past? Yeah, me too. Hu Xiaoheng also began to go along with Gu Nianji's words. The person I like has to be beautiful, coquettish, powerful, good at everything, and good to me. Gu Nianji's brain couldn't process it anymore. She stared blankly at Hu Xiaoheng. What a coincidence, Hu Xiao. Why do we like the same person? It's not a coincidence. You grew up with me, so you like the same person. What's so strange about that? Hu Xiaoheng folded his hands behind his head and leisurely leaned against the lacquered bed. Gu Nianji rubbed her head. She felt like there was something she hadn't said. She moved forward and climbed up Hu Xiaoheng's body to his chest. Using it as a platform, her big, wet eyes blinked in front of his eyes. Hu Xiao, have you ever thought about finding a girlfriend? Why are you so concerned about my girlfriend today? Hu Xiaoheng gave her a sidelong glance and wrapped his arm around her slender waist to prevent her from rolling off the bed. Your girlfriend. Didn't you just say you don't have one? Gu Nianji's heart wrenched. How could you lie? You liar. You're such a liar. As she spoke, she actually began to cry. She lay on Hu Xiaoheng's chest and sobbed with great sincerity. Hu Xiaoheng looked up at the top of the lacquered bed. He was speechless. It was even harder to deal with a drunk girl than when she wasn't. He took a few deep breaths and turned to the side to move away from the sensitive parts of his body. He took a tissue from the bedside table and wiped Gu Nianji's tears. Don't cry so easily. I said I don't have one, so I don't have one. Alright, don't cry anymore. Really? Gu Nianji took the tissue and wiped her nose. You really can't lie to me. This is really important to me. Hu Xiaoheng was silent for a while. Why is it important to you whether I have a girlfriend or not? That's none of your business. Gu Nianji wiped her tears and felt much better. She lay back on Hu Xiaoheng's chest and looked at him in fascination. Hu Xiaoheng didn't move. He let her stare for a long time before lifting her up and laying her on her side. He asked nonchalantly, You and Mei Xiaowen didn't work out because you already have someone you like. Gu Nianji didn't notice and blurted out her true thoughts. Yes, I do have someone I like. I'll only like him for the rest of my life. If I can't be with him, I won't be with anyone else. I'd rather be alone for the rest of my life. What kind of person is that? Hu Xiaoheng asked calmly. His face was expressionless. Of course he's good. He's good at everything. He's almost a perfect person. Gu Nianji sighed and leaned her head on Hu Xiaoheng's shoulder. She was extremely satisfied. How can there be a perfect person? Hu Xiaoheng laughed. Nianji, don't think too highly of men. He paused and asked, Who is he? It's the second night shift. Our monthly votes are too good. I have no choice but to wait until the third night shift. Our monthly votes have been cast. There's still the third night shift at 7 p.m. What do you think? Chapter 208. When Hu Xiaoheng asked this, his gaze fell on the top of the lacquered bed and did not look at Gu Nianji. He waited for a long time, but Gu Nianji was still silent. Tilting his head, he saw that she had already fallen asleep. Hu Xiaoheng looked at her silently for a while, then leaned down and kissed her forehead. His burning hot lips pressed against her bright and clean forehead, and there was actually a feeling of electricity. Hu Xiaoheng paused before slowly moving away. He touched Gu Nianji's face and stood up with a complicated expression. In a young girl's heart, liking and disliking were two very simple and pure things. However, if two people really wanted to be together, it wasn't something that could be decided by liking or disliking. Hu Xiaoheng straightened his collar, opened the door to the private room, and walked out. Outside the door, Xue Jingjiang and the others had returned and were singing karaoke at the top of their lungs. Hu Xiaoheng walked over and sat on the sofa. Hong Ziki quickly came over to talk to him. Hu Xiao, can I ask if you're close with that Barbados rich lady, Gu Yanran? No, Hu Xiaoheng answered briefly. Why do you ask? It's like this. Didn't she want to transfer her assets to our country? We were going to invest heavily in a few areas. The great fool Xue, little Chui, and I had a project, and Gu Yanran's people came over to take a look. They were quite satisfied and planned to invest. However, we aren't familiar with her. I heard that you once did her a big favor, so I wanted to ask you. Hong Ziki said in one breath, and then said, but don't feel burdened. You don't need to show favoritism in this matter. Business is business, private is private. We're just trying to find out if she's really rich. It would be awkward if she's a liar. Oh. Hua Xiaoheng nodded. Not to the extent of being a scammer. The Gus are considered wealthy in Barbados. Of course, this is a small country, so don't overestimate their strength. As they talked about business, Cui Baiwen and Xue Jingjiang joined them. Bai Tianchuan remained silent. When they were done, Bai Tianchuan wiped his face and said to Hua Xiaoheng, Hua Xiao, do you know about my second uncle? I don't know. What happened? Hua Xiaoheng's explanation was flawless. Even if Yin Shixiang, who had worked with him, saw him like this, he would probably think that his mission back then was an illusion and that it had never happened. Bai Tianchuan painfully said, our family was thinking that although second uncle made a big mistake, he is also dead. Could we bring his body back to our country and bury it with our family? He's drifting alone in a foreign country. Hua Xiaoheng's eyes narrowed imperceptibly, and a glint flashed across his eyes. He looked down and tapped one hand on his thigh as he shook his head. There's no point in telling me this. If you want to plead for leniency, your Bai family's first branch will have a say. It was Bai Yueran's branch. They were against bringing Bai Yuxing's body back. Bai Tianchuan didn't have a choice. He spread his hands and said, all right, I also know that second uncle was ridiculously wrong, so he deserved this outcome. I've already done what my family told me to do. It'll be easier for me to report when I get back. Hua Xiaoheng smiled again and turned to ask Xue Jingjiang and the others about the project they were working on. Time passed very quickly when the men started to talk about business. When Gu Nianji woke up, she realized it was already past 4 in the afternoon. Her head was still dizzy, and she didn't feel any better after sleeping. She lay on the bed for a while before she heard the door open. Hua Xiaoheng walked in. Oh. You're already awake. Let's go eat dinner. It's all set up outside. Hua Xiaoheng stood ramrod straight in front of the bed and looked down at her. Gu Nianji squinted uncomfortably and tried to recall what she had said and done before she fell asleep. However, her mind was a mess and she couldn't figure it out no matter how hard she tried. All right, stop shaking me. Let's go eat and then we'll go home. Hua Xiaoheng reached out to pull her up. She threw herself forward into Hua Xiaoheng's arms. Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. He felt that something was different about Gu Nianji now that she was awake. Gu Nianji smiled and wrapped her arms around Hua Xiaoheng's waist to give him a hug. She quickly let go and supported herself against the wall as she left the room. Although she walked unsteadily, she didn't show any signs of falling. When she exited the small room, she saw 2 tables set up outside. This time, it was a table for the men and another table for the women. Because everyone was eating medicinal cuisine, the men ate different medicinal cuisine than the women ate, so they had to be separated. When Gu Nianji, Mrs. Cui, Xue Xinran, and Guo Huaning ate, she discovered that they were drinking red wine. Nianji, this 1982 Lafite tastes pretty good. Guo Huaning poured a small glass for Gu Nianji. It's mellow. I like it. Gu Nianji had just drunk Maotai that morning. It was white wine, so now they were asking for red wine. She wanted to refuse, but when she saw how excited Mrs. Cui and Xue Xinran were, and how the men were focused on their own business, she gritted her teeth and forced herself to drink. As expected, the white wine she had drunk in the morning hadn't been metabolized yet, so it was mixed with the red wine. When Hua Xiaoheng finally realized what was going on and asked her to stop drinking, she was already more drunk than she had been in the morning. Mrs. Cui and Xue Xinran were embarrassed. They quickly said, "It's our fault, we didn't know little Gu's tolerance was so low." Guo Huaning, who had been the most aggressive in persuading Gu Nianji to drink, shrank to the side and said nothing. It's not a matter of tolerance. Even a man with a high tolerance can't handle the combination of high-quality white wine and high-quality red wine. Xue Jingjiang sighed and called for Gu Nianji to be stewed to sober her up. Hua Xiaoheng looked at the time. It was almost 6 o'clock. He hugged Gu Nianji and said, "It's fine, I'll take her home. We've been out all day, it's time to go back." He had originally come out with Gu Nianji to buy things for his mother, but they had ended up shopping all day. He had drunk so much that he couldn't drive. He had no choice but to call Fan Jian and ask him to pick them up at the underground parking lot of Sion Plaza. Gu Nianji was completely drunk. She didn't remember getting in the car or how she got home. She only remembered curling into a warm embrace as soon as the night wind blew. Her mind, which had been muddled from her nap, was starting to connect again. In her drunken stupor, Gu Nianji recalled their unfinished conversation. Hua Xiaoheng draped an arm around her shoulders and led her to his suite on the first floor. Gu Nianji clung to his arm and said drunkenly, "Hua Xiao, you want to know who I like, don't you? I remember you asked." Hua Xiaoheng didn't say anything and calmly walked into his room. Gu Nianji's hand caressed the side of his face impatiently, then moved forward to his lips. Her fingers traced the shape of his lips as she sleep-talked, "The person in my heart is you. Uncle Hua." Hua Xiao. Xiaoheng. As soon as Gu Nianji called out Xiaoheng, Hua Xiaoheng had already kicked the door open and nimbly turned around. He grabbed her arms with one hand and pushed them high into the air. With the other hand, he raked his fingers through her black hair and pressed her against the wall by the door. Without a word, he leaned down and rained kisses on her curvy lips. Gu Nianji's seductive skills were laughably childish, but to him, it was the most difficult test of his life. The moment she said his name, she was the most powerful weapon in the world, destroying all of his toughness. Hua Xiaoheng kissed her like he was gnawing on her, his lips ravaging hers. The tip of his tongue pried open her tightly closed lips and delved into her fragrant interior, wanting nothing more than to block all her breath. His lips and tongue ravaged her, washing her. He kissed her thoroughly inside and out. This was not enough. He even started to bite her lips bit by bit, and then bit the tip of her tongue, forcefully holding it and refusing to let go. Gu Nianji was completely sober the moment Hua Xiaoheng pounced on her and kissed her. She was forcefully pressed against the wall by Hua Xiaoheng and passively enduring his kisses. Her entire body was trembling, and her consciousness was beyond her control. She couldn't believe that all of this was real. She felt like she was dreaming, and there really was everything in a dream, including the most impossible person's wild kisses. It was just like how she used to secretly fantasize about it every night. His strong arms surpassed even her boldest imagination, and were more perfect than all of her imaginations. He kissed me. He kissed me. He really kissed me. Gu Nianji's entire body trembled as if she had been electrocuted. She tried to respond. She also wanted to feel him, wanted to know if all of this was real or just a dream. But she couldn't move because of Hua Xiaoheng. She was completely under his control, and even her breathing was involuntarily controlled. Even her lips and tongue were tightly sucked in by him. The tip of his tongue moved in and out of her lips, bringing with it waves of soreness and numbness. But she didn't feel suffocated, nor did she feel pain. She only wanted to surrender to his most powerful shackles. She was willing to be imprisoned by his love and become a prison. Hua Xiaoheng's breath on his lips carried the sweet taste of alcohol and a little smoke. There was also the faint smell of sulfur between his fingers. It was the smell of gunpowder from bullets and leather. The strange thing was that when these scents were mixed together, it didn't smell bad at all. Instead, it was filled with an indescribable masculinity that strongly attracted Gu Nianji. It made her think of desert dust, river sunset, a general in uniform, a bow and arrow in his hand, a wine pouch at his waist, and prey on horseback. Gu Nianji's legs grew weaker and weaker, and she couldn't stand. She could only wrap around him like soft vines. If Hu Xiaoheng hadn't raised her hands to support them against the wall with one hand, she really would have slipped to the ground. But after holding them for a long time, Gu Nianji couldn't help feeling her arms ache. She cried out twice and began to struggle. Hu Xiaoheng paused and finally stopped the torrential kisses. He moved away from her lips and let go of her arms. He lowered his head and buried it against Gu Nianji's neck, slowly calming his heavy breathing. This was the third 3,000-word update. It was the first time Willow Deity Whisper had added an update to the spiritual pet fate in July. My dear friends, monthly votes are too amazing. I had no choice but to update 3 times today. Oh, ___, oh. Chapter 209. Gu Nianji could feel Hu Xiaoheng's hot breath lingering around her neck, and she couldn't help feeling very excited. She reached out with trembling hands, and her movements were very gentle. She reached out from under Hu Xiaoheng's armpits and wrapped her arms around his broad back. Because of this position, her entire body was nestled in Hu Xiaoheng's hot embrace. Hu Xiaoheng didn't make a sound. His heavy breathing gradually subsided, and he remained motionless as he leaned over and rested his head on Gu Nianji's shoulder. 1 centimeter more and he would be able to touch her soft, delicate, and slender neck, but he didn't move further. Gu Nianji hugged Hu Xiaoheng tightly with satisfaction. He was so tall, so strong, and his entire body could almost cover her, but she still couldn't help reaching out and trying her best to feel and touch the only man in her heart. Hu Xiaoheng's hands were pressed against the wall, and he tried his best to maintain a physical distance from Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji was completely immersed in the ecstasy of being intimate with the man she loved. She didn't even feel Hu Xiaoheng's body move away. She only instinctively turned her head, and her soft lips gently swept across Hu Xiaoheng's earlobe. Her lips were so soft, and the earlobe was one of the most sensitive parts of the human body. Hu Xiaoheng was caught off guard, and a heart-wrenching numbness spread from his earlobe. It almost destroyed the perseverance he had just put up. Nianji. Hu Xiaoheng opened his mouth to call her. His voice was extremely hoarse and low, like he was calling from the depths of his heart. Gu Nianji's heart skipped a beat. Without hesitation, she opened her red lips and sucked on Hu Xiaoheng's earlobe. Hu Xiaoheng let out an extremely low growl from the depths of his throat. His entire body was about to explode. He clenched his fists against the wall and used almost all of his self-control, as well as the professional discipline of forbearance and restraint that had been cultivated in the military for many years. Only then did he not do anything that would get out of hand. But Gu Nianji didn't seem to know the devastating impact of her actions on Hu Xiaoheng. Or maybe she knew, but she didn't care. At a time like this, she only wanted to do whatever she wanted to the man she loved. She wanted to make him happy, and she wanted to make herself happy. She wanted to feel the joy of this moment. It was like he had set a fire on her, and she wanted this fire to burn on him. She wanted him to know that she had grown up. Gu Nianji sucked on Hu Xiaoheng's earlobe even harder. Hu Xiaoheng took a few deep breaths before reaching out to pinch Gu Nianji's chin and force her to release his earlobe. Gu Nianji moved aside impatiently to avoid Hu Xiaoheng's fingers. Hu Xiaoheng took the opportunity to stand up straight and save his earlobe. Unexpectedly, the next moment, Gu Nianji was pestering him again. Standing on her tiptoes, she raised her head and closed her eyes. Pouting her red lips, she moved closer to Hu Xiaoheng's face. However, Hu Xiaoheng was too tall. Even if she stood on her tiptoes, she could only reach his chin. Lower your head. Xiaoheng. Gu Nianji begged him softly. Hu Xiaoheng sighed and bent down to bring his lips to hers. Gu Nianji giggled and reached out to caress his lips with her finger for a long time before gently pressing her lips against his. Her voice was muffled as she whispered against his lips. You're so hard, but your lips are quite soft. Hu Xiaoheng didn't want to pay attention to her meaningless whispers. He only quietly moved his hard body a step back. Gu Nianji kissed him carefully, then kissed him again. Finally, she softly pressed her lips tightly against Hu Xiaoheng's. Then she stuck out the softer tip of her tongue and mimicked Hu Xiaoheng's actions. She licked his lips once. Hu Xiaoheng closed his eyes and wrapped his arms around Gu Nianji. He really couldn't resist her playful kisses, so he took the initiative again and kissed her lips very gently. Then he moved up from her lips to the tip of her delicate nose, and then up to her forehead like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. He kissed her there again. It was a kiss that didn't contain any strong emotions, like a goodnight kiss. Gu Nianji's pounding heart gradually calmed down with Hu Xiaoheng's gentle kiss. She raised her head and looked at Hu Xiaoheng's calm face. Her large eyes were full of hope. Hu Xiaoheng released her and said hoarsely, "Go shower and sleep early." Oh. Gu Nianji didn't expect him to tell her to sleep early after such an intense kiss. Hu Xiaoheng ignored her and turned to open the master bedroom door to take a shower in the guest bedroom. It was winter in the imperial capital, so even with central air conditioning, the cold water was still very cold. However, Hu Xiaoheng had no choice but to take a cold shower to calm his hot body. After showering, he put on his black short-sleeved t-shirt and a pair of pajama pants of the same color and sat alone on the bay window sill in the guest bedroom. Opening the window a crack, he lit a cigarette and started smoking silently. Today, he actually had such an uncontrollable impulse, which really made him vigilant. Perhaps Gu Nianji's influence on him was greater than he thought. He silently lowered his thick eyelashes and held the cigarette between two fingers. He gently blew out a white smoke ring. Looking up at the thick night sky and the snow that hadn't melted yet, his heart had already hardened again. After Gu Nianji finished showering, she also changed into the black t-shirt Hu Xiaoheng gave her as pajamas. The long pajamas covered half of her thighs. Against the black background, the other half of her thighs looked even more fair and slender. She sat in front of the vanity for a while with her wet hair and dried it with the hairdryer before returning to the bed. Looking at the time, it was only 8 o'clock. She wasn't sleepy at all and didn't think about going to bed. Touching her nearly swollen lips, Gu Nianji recalled the kiss just now. Her heart was in turmoil and couldn't calm down for a while. Sometimes she felt incredibly lucky and happy, but sometimes she felt that happiness came too quickly and made her dizzy. She almost couldn't believe it was real. But regardless of whether she believed it or not, Hu Xiaoheng really did kiss her. She couldn't be dreaming, could she? Thinking about the passionate kiss just now, Gu Nianji's heart heated up even more. She lifted the blankets and got out of bed. Pacing around the room, she finally couldn't resist looking for Hu Xiaoheng. Arriving at the door of Hu Xiaoheng's guest bedroom, Gu Nianji gently knocked on the door. There was no light in the room, so Gu Nianji wasn't sure if Hu Xiaoheng was in the room. Also, no one answered her. She knocked for a long time, but no one responded. She steeled her heart and gently pushed the door to the guest bedroom. It actually opened. Gu Nianji was speechless. The room was indeed dark, but it wasn't so dark that she couldn't see anything. As soon as she opened the door, she saw Hu Xiaoheng sitting on the bay window sill. He had a cigarette in his hand, and his long legs were on the window sill. One leg was bent and the other was extended as he leaned lazily against the large pillow. Gu Nianji opened her mouth and wanted to call him as Xiaoheng, but when the words were on the tip of her tongue, she felt a little ashamed. It was a very normal name, but because of what he had just done, it seemed to Gu Nianji that it had become a little secret between lovers. She didn't want to share this taboo with others, and she didn't want to call him that in front of others. Composing herself, Gu Nianji slowly walked over. Hu Xiao, you can't sleep either. Hu Xiaoheng didn't move. He held the cigarette in his hand and watched Gu Nianji walk closer. Turning his head, He stubbed out the cigarette in the ashtray and closed the bay window tightly. He said dryly, "Are you done showering?" "Yeah." Gu Nianji walked to the bay window sill and sat on the other side, facing him from a distance. She didn't dare to look up. Instead, she dragged a large pillow over and hugged it to her chest. Mustering up her courage, she asked, "What shall I just said what was on my mind. Do you have anything to say to me?" This was the first 2,400-word update. My dear friends, your monthly votes yesterday were so awesome. Thank you for your monthly votes. Will there be any more today? Thank you for the Heshabi that the leader of the Enigma-Anxi Alliance rewarded yesterday. Mwah. There would be an extra update at 7 p.m. Chapter 210. Hu Xiaoheng propped an arm on his bent left leg and looked at Gu Nianji, who was hanging her head. He looked out the window and smiled faintly. What do you want to say? Gu Nianji was speechless. She suddenly felt uncomfortable. He shouldn't be like this. She had already said what was on her mind. How could he not respond? Gu Nianji looked up angrily and bravely said, "I already said I like you. What about you?" "Oh." Hu Xiaoheng nodded and said nonchalantly, "Thank you." Gu Nianji exploded. She was so angry that she got up and threw the pillow in her arms at Hu Xiaoheng. Hu Xiaoheng blocked it with his arm and the pillow flew to the other side of the room. Seeing that the pillow couldn't attack Hu Xiaoheng, Gu Nianji could only use herself as a weapon and pounced at him. Hu Xiaoheng reached out to catch her and let her sit beside him. He patted her back and smiled faintly. "Are you crazy? Can't you let me think about it?" Gu Nianji became even angrier. He had already hugged and kissed her and he still wanted to think about it. Think about what? Are you going to say that you drank too much? That's why you had sex after drinking? Gu Nianji was so anxious that she didn't know what to say. If you dare say that, I'll run away from home. Gu Nianji glared at Hu Xiaoheng fiercely. She was terrified that he would say something heartless. After all, Hu Xiaoheng had always been strict with her and wouldn't agree to unreasonable requests no matter how much she argued. She remembered that when she was 13 years old, there was a time when she really liked to play games, almost to the point of addiction. Hu Xiaoheng discovered it when he came back from a mission and said he wouldn't let her play. No matter if she cried, threw a tantrum, went on a hunger strike, or ran away, he made her submit without any room for negotiation. In the end, she got rid of her gaming addiction, but her fear of Hu Xiaoheng was still deep in her bones. She moved closer to Hu Xiaoheng and grabbed his arm to look at him nervously. Hu Xiaoheng turned his breathtakingly handsome face and looked at her silently. Then he smiled at her. Gu Nianji was dazzled by the pure white snow floating outside the window. His smile dazzled her so much that she almost lost her mind. Then she heard his voice, which seemed to come from the sky. "You want to know my answer? Flirt with me. Seduce, you." Gu Nianji's breath was stuck in her throat. She was almost scared silly. He. How did he know that I wanted to flirt with him? That's right. Once you've flirted, I'll be yours. Hu Xiaoheng leaned forward and patted Gu Nianji's face. He smiled at her dazed expression. He had never been so relaxed before. He leaned against the large pillow with one arm resting on his bent left leg. His right leg was stretched out on the bay window sill. His gaze lingered on her for a moment before moving out of the window. She was shocked for a full minute before she found her tongue and stammered, You. Are you serious? You can't joke about this kind of thing." The expression on his face was so nervous that he almost cried. "I'm not joking." Hu Xiaoheng turned his head and reached out a finger to lift Gu Nianji's chin. "I've always kept to my word. Gu Nianji closed her eyes and moved her chin away angrily. There was a little person in her heart screaming, "Come on. Hurt each other. Who's afraid of who? It's just flirting." As she thought this, she heard Hu Xiaoheng say leisurely, "But what if you run away from home? You'll never be able to flirt with me." The little person in Gu Nianji's heart had already pulled out a knife and slashed at Hu Xiaoheng. Of course, she was only fantasizing about it in her heart. Hu Xiaoheng's powerful aura was evident. Even flirting with him required his consent. "But you kissed me just now." Gu Nianji was unwilling to be completely suppressed by Hu Xiaoheng. She resisted weakly. "Wasn't it because you like me? I already said it was alcohol." Hu Xiaoheng carelessly dusted off his pajama pants. "I can't help it if you don't believe me." Gu Nianji was at her wit's end. She silently lowered her head and obediently said, "Then please forgive me if I'm not good at flirting. Okay, work hard to improve your professional skills." Hu Xiaoheng patted her shoulder. "I like your perceptivity." He looked like he was very much looking forward to the prospect of being flirted with. Gu Nianji pouted and secretly looked at Hu Xiaoheng. However, she couldn't tell what he was feeling at all. The passionate kiss just now was like a flash in the pan. It was a rare moment when Hu Xiaoheng lost control. It was too short. Gu Nianji sleepwalked out of Hu Xiaoheng's bedroom and returned to her own. She had cried and argued with Hu Xiaoheng and even tried to hit him. Gu Nianji thought about it now and only felt exhausted. She fell asleep as soon as she fell. After Gu Nianji left, Hu Xiaoheng didn't sleep. He turned to look out the window, and the smile on his face gradually faded into the darkness. He took out his phone and played with it for a while. Finally, he opened the address book and found General G's number. It was only 9 o'clock. General G was reading in the study. When he saw it was Hu Xiaoheng calling, he happily picked it up. "Xiaoheng. You're not asleep yet?" Hu Xiaoheng nodded. "Not yet." "General G, you're still reading?" "Yes, there are a few translated military works from abroad. I'm fascinated by them and have a lot of thoughts." General G put his reading glasses back on. "Oh right, why are you calling me so late at night? What's the matter?" He knew that Hu Xiaoheng rarely called him outside of work hours. When he did, it meant he had something important to say. However, Hu Xiaoheng only exchanged a few pleasantries with him before asking some personal questions. "General G, if I want to get married, how long will the background check take?" "Get married?" General G almost fainted. He stood up abruptly. "When did you get a girlfriend? Why are you talking about getting married?" Hu Xiaoheng laughed. "I'm just asking about the procedure to see how long it will take. You know, I don't have much time to spend on personal matters. If I must get married, of course, it's better to be prepared early." He had a special status. He was a high-ranking military official and an important core member of the Special Intelligence Force. The woman who could marry him had to have all their family and social connections investigated. The background check could sometimes take several years. "Oh, that's more like it. You scared me so much that my high blood pressure almost flared up." General G slowly sat down. "It's good that you're planning ahead. However, as someone who's been through it, I still advise you not to get married just for the sake of getting married. Find a woman you like, get along with her, and then think about getting married. As for the background check, as long as you find a girl who matches your family background, the background check will definitely be quick. If you're not quick, come find me." Hu Xiaoheng chuckled. He didn't argue with General G. He only asked a lot more questions about the background check procedure. He used to think that these things were overly sensitive and never paid attention to them. He never dreamed that he would have to deal with the military's background check organization one day. After talking about the marriage background check, General Ji had a stroke of inspiration. He actually mentioned Gu Nianji. Xiaoheng, how's Nianji lately? She's already 18 and doesn't need a guardian. I heard that you brought her back to your home. Yeah. Hu Xiaoheng put on his Bluetooth headset and spoke to General Ji. He turned on his computer and began to pull up various background check documents from the internet to carefully study. This girl has a good character, but unfortunately, her background is unknown. Otherwise, I would have specially approved her to join the army and follow you as a little follower. General Ji laughed. What a pity, what a pity. Hu Xiaoheng's fingers tightened around the mouse. He grunted. We're still investigating her background, so she'll still follow me. Does General Ji have any objections? No, no. General Ji quickly said, it's best if she's willing to follow you. Don't push her away. I feel that she's very important, so you can't let your guard down. Of course not. Hu Xiaoheng's lips curled into a faint smile. Don't worry, General Ji. This was the second 2,400-word update. Do you still have monthly votes? I'm a bit busy today. Tomorrow, I'll try for the third update. Chapter 211. Gu Nianji slept soundly, probably because she was too emotionally drained the night before. She didn't even dream. Hu Xiaoheng woke up at 6 a.m. sharp, and went to his gym to train for an hour and a half after washing up. He ran on the treadmill for half an hour, then did weightlifting, stretching, and boxing. With his stamina, this kind of intense training was only a warm-up. But because he was at home, he didn't have to do the same intense training as he did in the military, such as running 10 kilometers obstacle course every day. Gu Nianji often said he wasn't human. Hu Xiaoheng couldn't help smiling at the thought of Gu Nianji's reluctance, but not daring to speak up. A white towel hung around his neck as he walked out of the gym. He bumped into Hu Zhelan. She was wearing a fitted 100-bird checkered Chanel dress suit. The dress was tight and accentuated her gourd-shaped figure. Cousin brother, you went to the gym. Hu Zhelan was shocked. Weren't you drunk last night? Doesn't your head hurt? Hu Xiaoheng was wearing a black military vest, revealing his muscular arms and shoulders. Camouflage sweatpants hung loosely around his waist, his forehead beaded with sweat. He had a towel hanging from his neck so he could wipe it off at any time. He stopped when he saw Hu Zhelan, and wiped the sweat off his forehead with the towel. It's all right, I met a few friends yesterday. Cousin brother, second uncle and grandfather said we're having a New Year's party this time. Do you have any friends you want to invite? Give me the list, I'll send out the invitations. Hu Zhelan stepped forward and raised her hand to pat Hu Xiaoheng's shoulder. Huh? What's this? Hu Xiaoheng instinctively stepped back to avoid Hu Zhelan's hand. Okay, I'll get Nianji to give you the list when I get back. He nodded to Hu Zhelan, and walked towards his suite. Hu Zhelan looked at Hu Xiaoheng's back, and smiled as she shook her head. Her cousin was still the same, too defensive around women. What should she do? Was she really going to be a bachelor for the rest of her life? The servant following her saw this and whispered, Eldest miss, what's wrong with eldest young master? She's helping him out of the goodness of her heart. It's fine, he's just like that. He's already treating his family the best. Hu Zhelan left with a smile. Hu Xiaoheng returned to his suite and first went to the bathroom in the guest bedroom to shower. When he came out, he saw that Gu Nianji's bedroom door was still tightly shut. He looked at his watch. It was already 8 in the morning. Nianji, it's time to wake up. He knocked on the door. There was no sound from the other side of the door. He thought that Gu Nianji still wanted to sleep in, but thinking about yesterday, maybe she deserved a good rest. Hu Xiaoheng was about to turn to leave when he suddenly heard the door behind him open. He turned around just in time to see Gu Nianji standing by the door in his oversized black t-shirt. She was barefoot, and her long, snow-white legs looked breathtakingly fair against the black t-shirt. Hu Xiaoheng looked away and said dryly, "You're awake. It's time to get up." Gu Nianji covered her mouth and yawned. When she opened her eyes to see that Hu Xiaoheng was about to leave, she instinctively grabbed his wrist. "Hu Xiao, you're up. Well, do you want to exercise early?" Hu Xiaoheng didn't turn around and said seriously, "There's also a gym here and a treadmill. Do you want to go exercise?" Gu Nianji hated treadmills, so she immediately let go of his wrist. Her eyes darted around and she said softly, "I want a shower." "Hu Xiao, I can't find my clothes. Can you help me find something to change into?" With that, she turned to leave. Hu Xiaoheng turned around and saw that the door was ajar. Gu Nianji's long legs were alluring as she walked towards the bathroom. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down, and he swallowed again. He instantly changed his mind and pushed the door open to follow her. Closing the door to Gu Nianji's bedroom, Hu Xiaoheng first went to the closet to look. He picked out a loose yellow cashmere pullover from Alice and Olivia, straight white custom-made wool trousers, and a pair of nude ankle boots to match. He put them on the sofa. When Gu Nianji came out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped around her, she saw Hu Xiaoheng standing in front of the French windows with his back to her. His hands were in his trouser pockets as he looked out at the beautiful scenery of white snow and red plum blossoms. "The clothes are on the sofa." Hu Xiaoheng heard the bathroom door open and knew that Gu Nianji had finished showering. He said without turning around. Gu Nianji glanced at the loose yellow cashmere pullover, straight white trousers, and nude ankle boots on the sofa. Her eyelids couldn't help but twitch. She thought to herself that Hu Xiao hadn't taken care of her daily life in the past few years, but he hadn't forgotten about it. When she had first started working for him, he had taken care of all her clothes from inside out. At that time, a young man of only 22 years old had to take care of a little girl like that. It must have been hard on him. Gu Nianji was touched and happy, but when she thought of Hu Xiaoheng's annoying words last night, she felt indignant. Didn't he want to hit on her? She coughed lightly and said, "Hu Xiao, I have the outerwear, but what about the underwear? I can't just wear the outerwear, can I?" Hu Xiaoheng was speechless. After a long time, his lips finally curved into a smile, but when he turned around, his expression had already returned to normal. "Do you want underwear?" "Okay," he said calmly and walked to the closet again. He opened the bottom drawer and found where Gu Nianji kept her bra and panties. Gu Nianji's face instantly turned as red as blood. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. However, Hu Xiaoheng only acted as if no one was around and rummaged through her colorful underwear drawer for a while. He asked without looking up, "What cup size do you wear now?" Gu Nianji's face darkened. She clenched her fists angrily and gritted her teeth as she said word by word, "No. I'll find it myself." "Huh? I thought you didn't know where you put it." Hu Xiaoheng finally turned around slowly and raised his long brows slightly. His dark, jade-like eyes were bottomless. Gu Nianji rushed to the closet and pushed Hu Xiaoheng away. She smiled and said, "Didn't Hu Xiao find it for me? I can find it myself now." Gu Nianji turned around and grabbed a dark blue lace bra and panties of the same style from the drawer. She quickly closed the drawer. "Really?" Hu Xiaoheng looked down at her. Her flawless skin was fair and pink from the shower. There were still transparent water droplets on it. A drop of water flowed down her neck and into her chest, all the way to the cleavage wrapped in the bath towel. He smiled meaningfully. "Is that so? I see. Then I'm leaving." He seemed to be dismissive of Gu Nianji's seduction methods. Gu Nianji's thoughts were exposed. She was furious and embarrassed. She looked at Hu Xiaohing's back and saw that he was about to leave the bedroom. She suddenly said, "Why is Hu Xiao leaving? Isn't he going to wait to see if I look good in this?" Hu Xiaohing stopped and let out a long sigh. After a moment of silence, he turned around and returned to the sofa. He put one hand on the back of the sofa and the other on his lap. He said calmly, "Okay, you change. I'll watch." Gu Nianji gritted her teeth and tried to take off the bath towel several times. However, under Hu Xiaohing's intense gaze, her hands trembled for a long time and she couldn't undo the towel. After a while, Gu Nianji stomped her feet. Okay. You're good. I lost to you." She bent over, grabbed her clothes from the sofa, and ran to the bathroom with them. Hu Xiaohing didn't leave either. He waited for Gu Nianji to change and come out. He looked her up and down and was very satisfied with his taste. He stood up as well. "Let's go eat breakfast." Gu Nianji had already come back to her senses. She gathered her courage and walked over to take Hu Xiaohing's hand. She looked up and said, "Hu Xiao, I think there's sand in my eyes. Can you blow it for me?" Hu Xiaohing stared at her for a while and said leisurely, "Since you want to blow the sand in your eyes, why are you pouting and closing your eyes?" This was the 2,400-word update for the first time. Continue asking for monthly votes and recommendation votes. Thank you so much Mom, the Phantom Mark, the Jade Goddess Sword, and yesterday's gift of Heshabi. Mwah. Today is the first day of the Labor Day long weekend in the United States. I have guests at home, so the update is a little late. There will be an extra update at 7 p.m. If you want the third update, give your relatives some excitement with their monthly votes. Oh, __intersection. Oh. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.